Welcome to the New Rugged Order podcast, exclusively on the Hard Knock Digital Culture channel. Now give it up to your host, people, MM2K.
What's up, people? What's up, people? What's up, people? It is your boy, MM2K of PNTS Network, Hard Knock Digital Culture, MM2K Gaming, CGTV, bippity boppity boop of everything. And I'm here with a special episode of NRO Podcast. This is the podcast where we talk about a lot of things AAA hardcore gaming related. And we got a doozy for you. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm going to outline this at the beginning. The subject that I'm going to go over today is something that I'm tired of not only talking about, but just frankly seeing. But this whole ordeal kind of was like an IQ test for the gaming community in certain regards. And a lot of people failed. And I definitely, as a gamer, as someone with a business pedigree, and as someone whose whole platform is based upon me being a fan of games and stuff like that, and liking to get into the nitty gritty about, I like this, over this and all that stuff, right? That the atypical, well, I don't want to say the atypical gamer, but maybe some of us hardcore gamers do on Twitter and all other stuff. I love getting to the nitty gritty of that, but also someone who has a business pedigree that understands why certain things are done and understand the effects, whether they're positive and negative, and how they can influence us. And what I try to do is, as I see those things coming, and I know, kind of like a tornado watcher, that something bad is coming down the pike, and I try to warn other people, look, that's just not a bunch of swirling wind that looks cool that is going to go right by you. That's something that could tear your body into several pieces. Like, let's get out of here. We don't want that. You know what I'm saying? Or how can we avert that thing coming over here? As someone who does that on a regular, but yet continue to see gamers not really get it. Sometimes there's just something in me that says, you know what, you gotta give it one more try, man. And even if they don't flock to you, even if someone, this is like a library, even if someone else comes across this content and they're like, you know what, I agree with this guy, let me repurpose it to my followers, because we're not here for a large following or any of that stuff. Again, I have a business pedigree. I am business minded. I do have businesses happening in this realm. But what I'm doing right here is for my leisure in something that I like doing. So if you want to repurpose this, you can give us our flowers. A lot of people don't. But the most important thing is that people just get it. And unfortunately, too often in this community, when you have gaming being more business-wise financially than music and movies, you guys and gals still have no inkling to the business structure around gaming and why things are done and what the ramifications are for you. And I'm not talking about Googling and understanding some legalese. No, that's not enough. You have to understand the legal and regulatory culture. We're going to talk about all that today. This is going to be a very lengthy podcast over one subject. Hopefully we'll get over it. Hopefully we'll be done from it here on going, but at least it's something that's going to be out there in the ethos for reference. And hopefully it'll do something to make gamers more informed so we can do our part to try to make gaming better for all of us true gamers. I want to get right into it. You know what I'm saying? But shout out to Cold Blood Sensei in the chat. He said, what does Cold Blood Sensei say? This is my brother from another mother, but he gonna get his lesson today. What did he say? He said, I'm so ready to hear your cap for that false messiah. Reforge. What does he also say? He says an IQ test and a whole bunch of laughing emojis. Here's the thing with Reforge. I really like his content. It's not about him being a messiah, because he's not saying, and again, and I don't want to take anything from him. I think his content is really good, particularly when it comes to this. And I'm not taking anything from him. I'm not saying that he's a lesser of a content creator. No, I think Reforge is great. I just became a member the other day. The thing is that it's not like he's some messiah. Reforge, I think, just is good at capsulizing and articulating the things that we feel is common sense, but he puts it in a way that isn't debatable. Like a lot of people are coming, he put it's such in logical terms. You know what I'm saying? It's so crafted in such a smart way that when you look at attempts to try to go against it, unless you're based in the facts, the common rhetoric, rather, that is being thrown around by people, as he illustrates, are emotionally tied or have an agenda to a certain outcome and aren't looking at the facts of the matter. He crafts it in such a way to where when they try to debate it, they look silly and they're far out in the weeds and they make no sense whatsoever. And I'm going to illustrate that because he put out an analogy out there that is really simple, nothing complex about it. There's nothing that should be hard to understand what he's illustrating and say, oh, well, that makes sense. And you can even disagree with his point of view on who has the better argument out of Sony and Microsoft. You can disagree on that end, on whether the deal should go through or not, because he has a certain position and I have a certain position. That's not what we're saying. What is being said is that he pretty much in layman's terms perfectly lined up what is going on. And the fact that people cannot understand that shows that there's a lot of talk about gaming. There's a lot of back and forth and arguing about gaming. Hell, there's even a lot of content, a lot of views, and a lot of subscriptions towards gaming. But when it comes to the business of gaming, too many people don't have a clue. I'm going to orchestrate that. And unfortunately, because people are so ignorant to it, I can't just sit there and take 5 minutes and say, this is why the analogy makes sense. So I got to kind of, like in a condensed fashion, as condensed as I can make it, explain business, then tie in gaming business, then go back to the analogy. It's like we got to reinvent the wheel again before we show you how to drive. And that's what we're going to do this episode. So I'm dedicating the whole episode. But again, I'm fatigued over this. I just want to put something out. I want to contribute in the best way that I can to put something out there in the ethos that is part of the education in this area. And then we're moving on. The best thing is just to wait for outcomes. Every little tick of this happening and that happening until the deal is either debunked or approved. It really doesn't matter as far as this type of attention to it. With that said, let's get into it. I want to welcome everybody to NRO Live. Okay. This is our weekly podcast where we deep dive into the world of AAA video games, the consumer actions and the business behind them. In this episode, we're going to explore the aftermath of the largest proposed video game deal in history, Microsoft's acquisition of Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion. We analyzed the deal and its impact on the gaming industry, including the potential exclusivity of Call of Duty to Xbox excuse me, ecosystem, and well, I won't say consoles, but to their ecosystem, and the concerns raised by Sony and regulatory bodies like the EU, CMA, and FTC. We also examine the roles and responsibilities of each party involved and address the common arguments and biases surrounding this deal. Buckle up and join us as we unpack what I like to call this episode, the deal in the aftermath. All right. So before we get into the arguments and whose side and where, whatever, let's just, for those of you that are under a rock or maybe caught this on the tail end as far as all this news around this deal, let's, in very short bullet points, explain to you what's going on with this deal in the immediate aftermath. So let's first talk about the deal. All right. So January 18th, Microsoft expressed its intent. Deal hasn't gone through yet, but expressed its intent to buy Activision Blizzard for $68.7 billion. This would make it if this goes through, this would be the largest acquisition in video game history. And it was predicated by the former number one just 2 years ago, orchestrated by the same company, Microsoft. And that deal was for Bethesda for, I believe, like $7 billion, something like that. And why this deal is so big and being talked about so much, understandably so to a certain degree, is that Activision Blizzard houses popular game content such as Call of Duty, Diablo, and then the King mobile games such as Candy Crush. They also make as far as mobile is concerned, they make the extremely popular Call of Duty mobile games. So that's just the gist of the deal. The aftermath. Now, since the deal was announced, okay, and a lot of people forget this. Since the deal was announced, and let me do this. I want to put this up there for people to see, because people have short-term memories. When you don't, let me just give you my pedigree real quick, and why I'm even interested in this. I have a pedigree of 25 plus years working with the Fortune 500 company. I've been fortunate and blessed enough to be able to work my way up from simply dealing with mail, right? During the course of dealing with mail, I worked my way up there because, I'm not trying to pat myself on the back, but I've always been a hard worker. A lot of people say it's because MM2K, I think you have ADHD. And even though I chuckle at that, I'm not trying to make light of ADHD. 2 of my children have been diagnosed with it. They're like, dude, you can't help but to do 1,000 things at once. And that's why if you follow my content, I do like a bunch of different things. Like, I don't just focus on one thing. I don't just focus on PlayStation. I don't just focus on Xbox. I like to cloud game. I just don't focus on cloud gaming. I have a day that I've worked out. Now I got a day dedicated to the ways that I game. Like Monday through Friday is dedicated to a separate way of gaming. And that's just the way I've always been. I've always been a multitasker. I always do more than one things at one time. I've always been someone who, I think I was like one of the first people in our corporation to work with like multiple computer screens. Like I had 4 when people were just getting 1. Like if I'm only doing one thing at one time, I'm bored. Like the only time I like to do one thing at one time is when I'm in relax mode. And really it's never one thing at one time. It's okay, I'm watching TV and I'm on my phone. You know what I'm saying? My wife gets mad at me because, and I've had to make this a practice because she's the total opposite. She has to be focused on one thing at a time. And I've had to put down my phone. I used to read a book before phones came out. I used to read a book and have conversations with people. But since phones come out, and then the advent of Twitter has been worse. So I put the book down. My wife hates seeing me with the phone. She doesn't mind the book, but there's so much to look at over a phone. Nonetheless, don't let the ADHD kick in, and the supposed ADHD kick in. Yeah, I've had to put the phone down. That's been a contention in my marriage. Putting the phone down and just doing that one thing, which is staring into my wife's eyes and just directing all my focus on her. So I was able to utilize whatever you call it, me just wanting to multitask, ADHD, whatever the case may be, and work my way up the top of the food chain in our mail area, right? Or pretty close to it. During that time, I was going to school. I was going to school for business management and accounting, and I got degrees in both. Okay. My former area had to be shut down because the technology that we were using was bottlenecked, and they were like, it's not even worth revamping this area. So they were shutting it down. And because of that, I had to go to a new area. I interviewed with different areas. They saw where I was going to school for, the one area that I was in previous to the one that I'm in now. And then they said, oh, wow, we could really use you. And worked my way up the food chain there even further. It's a completely different area from the mail place. And a lot of white collar, dealing with the richest companies in the world, also dealing with some of the richest people in the world. Worked my way up the top to VP status in that business sector, not of the entire company, but in that business sector. Managing managers, we kind of did everything because our sector was like an auxiliary sector to where we weren't the biggest money earning sector. When I say auxiliary sector, I mean, we did a lot of functions that, okay, when our business would go to other potential clients and say, hey, look, these are the services that we render. Our department isn't somebody that they promote. You know what I'm saying? They promote other services and they say, we do these services, and those are the services that they market. However, because the services that we market primarily to other companies have so many auxiliary other things attached to them, legal wise, you got to be able to do those things too. So the money making services are proposed to other clients and say, hey, or potential clients. We do like an RFP, I believe it. Yeah, refer for practice or something like that, where you try to obtain new business. And then the company may say, okay, we'll sign on to you, but this other stuff, this more complicated stuff that really isn't making most of our money, but is essential, this support stuff, that's what I'll call it. These support functions, the clients will either do them in-house or they'll pay somebody to do them. So we had a lot of clients that would pay us to handle these support functions. And that's what I did. Now, these support functions are very complicated. And then there's a lot of government oversight on them. And there's even more government oversight on them because now you got a third party doing something that you normally would do in-house. So now they're really watching you, but they're not making the money. They're just support mechanisms. I can't think of an analogy. I don't want to use analogies right now because there's a lot of people where analogies fly over their heads. So I'm not going to use any analogies, but we supported the more money-making business with the things that we did, even though what we did was more complicated, not as easy. Like those guys would go have a drink, go play golf sometimes, and we're doing 10, 12-hour days. Again, because I like to multitask, that was right up my alley. So we had a mumbo jumbo of things. We had customer service center, mail processing, reconcilement, and fiduciary, balancing and controls, IT, and we're handling those type of things that companies would normally do themselves. We're handling for those companies. And there was one juncture now, and then we also have business representatives that deal with certain things directly with the companies. All that other junkative stuff that I just announced, at one point in time, I managed the groups that did all that. IT. So if something IT related went down and we had to talk to the master engineers over at Microsoft, that was me. That was me and my IT people doing that. And then I could be dealing with that, not going home till 8 o'clock at night, you know what I'm saying? And then get something customer service related, a call center thing, a mail jamming thing, you know. So I've been all over the place. However, because I've had to be a jack of all trades, that also increased my opportunities, because then I went from doing that to where now I've built systems, because I've had to self-educate myself on databases and SQL and things like that I didn't, going into that area, I didn't know. So I've had to educate myself on that. I used that experience to learn a lot more things, and that stuff led me into investigative things. Actually working with the FBI, actually helping to draft Uniform Commercial Code. You've heard me say that a lot, but I say that a lot because it's somewhat relative to what's going on with this ABK deal. So just so people understand, I'm not just shooting this out the side of my ass. Working with our competitors, because of my established relationship around with the FBI on certain matters, and helping to influence. I think that's the best way to describe it. The redrafting of Uniform Commercial Code, because of certain loopholes and stuff in them that was causing regulatory pain for everybody, even the regulators. Having to give testimony in multi-million-dollar cases. Depositions, all that stuff. So I'm not somebody that just got on YouTube, maybe talked to a lawyer here and there, fanboyed over somebody that knows some legal stuff here and there. This is what I've done to keep my lights on, to feed my family. And again, when I referred earlier to, me putting this out there, me not necessarily looking for followers because of my knowledge or however I break things down, but me just putting it out there in the ethos. At this juncture, putting things in layman's terms, because I'm always used to dealing with more complicated things and people having a certain acumen. I'm not trying to be a smartass when I say that, but for the majority of that 25 plus year career, I'm dealing with people that have a certain acumen, that understand certain language. And for decades, I haven't had to break things down in layman's terms to people. I have managers for that. These are my expectations. These are how we need things to run. Make sure your teams are taking care of them, right? You know, there's certain, I would say HR matters, that came with my role that I had to be able to express in layman's terms. But taking complicated things and breaking it down to the very last compound, I haven't really had to do. I've relied on my managers for that. So that's why I say when I put things out there in the ethos, some people may say, oh, that's not how it works. That doesn't sound right to me. You just don't have the acumen to understand it. But there are people out there like Reforged Gaming, not a messiah, but understands things at that acumen level and knows how to break it down even better than I can. So I'm all for it. You know what I'm saying? So the reason why I wanted to give that history before I got into the aftermath of the deal, you know what I'm saying? Because it's important for people to understand that this is based upon, a lot of this is based upon the experiences that I have, but these are experiences that I've had with regulatory bodies. See, I don't just deal with them inside a court. My culture extremely extends beyond that. I would get calls from regulatory sectors about complaints and things like that, and having to draft responses to that. So when you, as the common gamer who don't have that experience, but just goes by something that sounds good based upon your limited acumen, and I know it sounds like a jackass, but we got to keep it real here. This is a coming to Jesus moment. This is one of those podcasts with your limited acumen. You say, well, that don't sound right or whatever like that. Understand why. That's not a me problem. That's a you problem. Because if you don't understand why things work and how they really go down, you are going to have the wool pulled over your eyes forever. And I can tell you that for the most part, particularly when it comes to mainstream gaming, all of these things that we're seeing now, as far as the scope of the actions, we've predicted on our platform. Like I was just having this debate with one of somebody else that looks at this deal differently than I do. And I said, look, I've been telling you, this is not going to be easy peasy. Like in the research for today's show, Microsoft was expecting to have this deal done by fiscal 2023, the latest. So I think fiscal 2023, the latest, fiscal 2023 for them is June, I believe, or April. They said that's the latest this is going to be done. That's not happening. We also told you that what's going to happen is cloud is going to play a bigger role. Even though you don't like cloud gaming, and even though a bunch of ignorant content creators may have told you cloud doesn't mean anything, cloud has played a role. It is being reported by Reuters that the EU has even dumped Sony's complaints about this deal, but they're still focusing on cloud. We told you that. Even before this, we told you. I remember sitting on the podcast with Next Gen 720. Shout out to my bro, my mentor. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't even be here at any juncture. But I remember sitting on a podcast with him and we talked about the revelation of Xbox moving to a business model where they know their content isn't the greatest. But they did that as an appetizer, a mouthwaterer to setting up the business structure to go. We said at the time EA and Take-Two to capture some of the biggest publishers in the world. We knew this was coming. We just didn't know which ones. And we said in that podcast years ago, we surmised that what Xbox was looking to do was capture some of the biggest publishers in the world, put them in Game Pass, then go to Sony and say, hey, look, we're not trying to make this exclusive, but if you want Madden on your console, we're going to make it available through xCloud and Game Pass. And me as a cloud gamer, me as a cloud aficionado in a lot of ways, I knew that would be an inferior way for the average gamer to play it even at this time. So that again was their smokescreen of saying we're still making it available, but at the same time making the competition's version inferior. So ultimately what happens is people prefer to go to Game Pass and get it. Z and I talked about that years ago before anybody was talking about that. A lot of those conversations were stemmed by the pedigree that I have. Also, with the experience in this that Z has had, and knowing that even though you may have a favorite box and Xbox may be your favorite box, you can't wholeheartedly take the biased executive's position on this stuff. You got to look at this thing holistically because there is a culture behind these regulatory bodies that completely goes past what you want to happen. All right. I spent enough explaining that part of it. Let's get into it. The aftermath. Since the deal was announced, people may have forgot this part. Sony lost, like immediately after the deal was announced, Sony lost $20 billion in market value. Cold Blood, I see your comments. I don't want you to think I'm ignoring you. There's just a lot of cover. I'm gonna get to it, brother. Trust me. I'm gonna answer your questions. But thank you for your support and your participation. But Sony lost $20 billion in market value after this deal was announced. You know how we do. Let me show you something. You guys forgot. I don't. Because for a living, I have to keep tabs on stuff. Y'all call it keeping receipts, but y'all only keep receipts within X amount of time. The two most important things about this argument I'm about to go over right now. Sony lost $20 billion in market value after the deal was just announced. Sony lost $20 billion in market value just by the deal being announced. Sony looks pathetic. Why would they even do this? They just are afraid that Microsoft is going to do more than them. There's no effect to their bottom line. Just by the deal being announced, Sony lost $20 billion. Jim Ryan looks pathetic. Well, how are they doing this? They want to be number one so bad on Twitter. That's why they're blocking this deal. And that's why they use Call of Duty as an example. Just by the deal being announced, Sony lost $20 billion in market value. You clearly, with that rhetoric, do not understand how this type of business works. I would like to show you something else. Directly after the deal was announced and Sony lost $20 billion in market value, this article from GameIndustry.biz that went around and queried, why the hell did that happen? Why would you lose $20 billion just because a deal was announced? Like, what does that mean? And this is what the analysts that have so much to do with that $20 billion being lost just because of projections and the analysts and what they play as a financial role. Y'all don't understand this. Y'all don't understand how it works. You may think it's stupid, but it doesn't matter what you think. Because this is the stuff that makes the world go around, and you don't even understand it. Let me read you an essential part of why the financial markets reacted the way to where Sony lost $20 billion in market revenue just by the announcement of the deal. Quote, making Call of Duty. This is before Sony announced anything about Call of Duty. This is January 19th, 2022. Quote, making Call of Duty exclusive to Xbox or even just included as part of Game Pass could be a major benefit for Xbox when these consumers decide between Xbox or PlayStation 5. Let me sip my tea. I feel like I'm even wasting my time here because someone's going to say, but why the analyst got something to do with this? That's stupid. So, right there, I could end this. For anybody that's questioning, why is Sony doing this? They're pathetic. Before Sony opened their mouths about this deal, there's another article that I have where Sony didn't officially say something about this deal for months later. And they said, what they said to the effect was, we expect Microsoft to honor the current deal as it stands. I think the current deal that was going was that there's like probably a year or two left on the contract. They said that months later. But before Sony opened their mouth about this deal, these are the two big revelations. A, Sony lost $20 billion in market value. They lost $20 billion in market value just on the announcement of the deal. And as people were looking and trying to understand why that was the case, GameIndustry.biz does what it does best, and they went out and they talked to analysts who had an impact on this occurring. They talked to them and they discovered that the analysts felt, quote, for example, quote, making Call of Duty exclusive to Xbox or even just including it as part of Game Pass could be a major benefit for Xbox when these consumers decide between Xbox or PlayStation 5. That's it. What is Sony's argument focused around? They're focused around the financial harm that the removal of Call of Duty would have to their business. Because analysts even said that this was going to have an impact before Sony even said anything. Now, were you calling that pitiful? Oh, that's a pitiful analysis about this. That's pitiful. That's stupid. No. Those of you that are Xbox fans, that it's all about what's happening on Twitter and who's winning the argument, you were salivating over that same very thing. Really, this podcast should be over. But I'm still going to put the entirety of this in the ethos so you are educated. So let's continue on. So, those two things happened. Following that, Sony has disputed the deal. Of the reasons for the dispute, Sony has cited that Call of Duty is just too big of a game, and I'm paraphrasing here, but they basically said this, I think, to the Brazilian regulators. They said that Call of Duty is too big of a game that cannot be replicated by anyone else, thus not being trustworthy in the sole hands of their platform's competitor. Now, there was a news that dropped today where Xbox or Microsoft, and I think this was very unwise, said to the regulators, because I guess the regulators asked them, why just 10-year deals? And they said, well, that's more than enough time for Sony to create a competitor to Call of Duty and it make up the loss. Sony is just being lazy, is what they were implying. Imagine Microsoft in its gaming output calling Sony lazy or implying that Sony is lazy. Imagine that. The world is turned upside down. But Sony's argument, again, all the way back in 2022 was that Call of Duty is too big of a game to be replicated by anyone else. There was like Activision Blizzard, or Activision mainly, have created something with a deep history, almost a 20-year history or however many years, that cannot be replicated, and it definitely can't be replicated in 10 years. And who is Microsoft to say how long they can take to do it when Microsoft, who owned Halo, something that used to be as big as what Call of Duty was, can no longer bring back that magic under this current regime that is trying to argue that, oh, Sony should be able to do this in 10 years. They don't even know when they can get Halo back to that level. But Sony should be able. To me, it was a dumbass argument to put out there. Microsoft, through this whole deal, I think this could be easier for them, and the pendulum could be swinging more in their favor if they just knew what to say and then when to shut up. And in this arena, it seems like they don't know what to say all the time and when to shut up. That was a dumb thing to say in lieu of Sony saying this can't be replicated. Look at games like Battlefield. EA has been trying this forever. Yes, we acquired Bungie, but they don't see Call of Duty activity. Like, nobody can do what Call of Duty. And the proof, the precedent is already out there. Whether you like Call of Duty or not, at that level, for what Call of Duty is doing, for a fully revenue-based software, because Fortnite is free to play. That's a different animal. But fully revenue-based software, there's nobody else competing like that with Call of Duty, especially for Sony. As far as Sony is concerned, I get that there's other publishers that collectively may have more sales on the platform than Activision, but they're not talking about Activision. They're talking solely about Call of Duty, singularly, unilaterally. It is or of the biggest selling platforms that is a substantial part of Sony's revenue on PlayStation. That's the argument. That's the focus. That's where we need to stay as far as evaluating Sony's argument. You ain't got to agree with Sony's argument. I don't fully agree with Sony's argument, but that's the focus. Stay out of the freaking weeds. So I think Microsoft's comments today were stupid. That's my analysis. All right. Sony has also claimed that Microsoft, despite their proposed 10-year deals to keep the game on the PlayStation platform, their also issues are that the deals offered to them, they said, were inadequate. Like, there are certain concerns with this being in Microsoft's hands that Sony wants assurances for. Let me give you another example. So remember way back when there was that whole Resident Evil contract that was dug up, and they were like, yeah, Sony blocks games coming to Game Pass if you have a marketing deal with them. And I'll refer back to Reforged Gaming. He said he looked at it, and I remember looking at it too. It's just so long ago, and I can't find the link. But if he's looked at it more recently, that's good. He had said that no, the deal specifically talks about the legal ramifications that Sony is saying. They're saying that, look, we're not going to pay you our money for a game if you're going to go and put the game on Game Pass. Don't you think that's common sense? Like, why would I pay you money and market a game that's going to be on this cheaper version? Like, if you're going to if you're going to accept our money for this game and allow us to market it with the PlayStation logo, because apparently there must be a benefit to it because of the brand that we built. If you're going to do that, there's got to be benefit for us too, and we're paying for it. So therefore, you can't put that in like a cheaper alternative. Day and date. And if you're going to put it in a subscription service, being that you're taking our money, our stipulation is you got to come and talk to us and offer us a deal, a synonymous deal, where we get to look at breakdowns and what you're being offered. So we can, probably get it in our service too in a viable time for us. And of course, Microsoft hears that and says, oh, well, if Sony has marketing rights to something, it ain't coming in Game Pass, because Microsoft don't want to release any NDAs to a developer so they can go back and tell Sony the secrets or the ramifications of a deal. Microsoft don't want that. So their stance is, oh, well, if you got a marketing deal with Sony because they have these stipulations about putting the game in Game Pass, then the game just ain't coming to Game Pass. Doesn't that make sense that they would have that stipulation? Like, I don't think and then I think there was a deal, I can't remember which one, I got to do the research, but I didn't have enough time to do it today, where people were making that against Sony, and then I can't remember if it was Daniel Moss, somebody came out with industry knowledge and said these are the types of deals that are common, especially now that you got these subscription services out here. And there was a deal that was shown that, I don't know if there was a deal that was shown or I'm just falling back on my recent memory of conversations with developers. I'm not going to say who, but while covering Stadia, my conversations with developers that said there's the same stipulations that apply when you want to put your game on Stadia, but you're putting it on Microsoft's platform. And somebody else came out and said, this is common across the board. So that's just to add some transparency to how that operates. But Sony's arguments are that the deal is inadequate, and we don't know what parts are inadequate because they don't want to get it. And I get it. And Sony and Microsoft isn't going to get into it. All they keep saying is it's a better deal. What does better mean? If Sony has certain assurance, like say for instance, there were certain assurances that came, but when ABK was independent of this deal, along with just the financial deal of it, there were certain assurances that Activision Blizzard would agree to that made Sony comfortable. How is Microsoft's proposal better if it won't give the same assurances? Is Microsoft claiming it's better because they're saying we're going to give it to you, we're going to license it to you at 10 years at a cheaper rate, but we're not going to give you the assurances? So let me ask you a question. Say you're going to go buy a TV. TV's worth, it's an OLED plasma, whatever the hell is the latest TV out there. Say the TV, a typical TV that you're looking for its size and its capabilities is $3,000. So you find one for like $2,500. You're like, oh, okay, that's cool. But someone else comes to you and says, hold on, we got that same TV with similar capabilities, very similar benchmarks. I'll give it to you for $1,700. And you're like, oh, okay, cool. Well, does your TV come with a warranty? Oh, no. So are you willing to drop $2,500 on something? Oh, and the TV could potentially be used. You're not 100% sure. You notice some things. Like it looked like it's an open box item. They're telling you, oh no, this ain't an open box item. AKA, we're gonna put the best quality control on your version of Call of Duty. You've seen instances to where they've said, oh, we don't have any incentive to sell open box items to people, and then after they were okay to make the transaction, they sold an open box item to somebody, right? So You're like, hold on, I need certain assurances. Even though yours is cheaper, I need certain assurances. Because I'm used to going here and getting a TV. And now you're selling the new TV. I don't know what it's going to be like under your ownership. And I remember dealing with you before, having always been the friendliest experience. You got to, you know what I'm saying? I need certain assurances if I'm going to buy your TV. You don't want to grant them. I want to know, as a consumer, would you go still buy that $1,700 version with no warranty? You can no returns, right? And your job. And look, and let me add to that: you're married, so your spouse said, "I want a brand new TV. Don't come back here with something new. Don't come back with something used. I want a brand new TV where you have a receipt." That's the stipulation. AKA, as an investor, you're going to protect our profits. You're going to protect our investment. Your spouse's way of protecting them getting involved, because they gave you half of the money, is they want a receipt and they want a good warranty on the TV. Are you then going to buy the $1,700 TV where they won't give you a receipt and they won't give you a warranty on it? If the answer to what you're saying is yes, turn this off. Don't listen to this anymore except for entertainment purposes, because then the rest of this is going to fly over your head. And also, I might add, you have no business talking about this deal because you don't get it. Now, to the seller of that TV, that's a better deal because I'm giving it to you cheaper. But as a consumer, you need certain assurances and you're not getting that. So I'd rather pay the extra $800 and get it from the reputable way that I've been getting it and fulfill the needs of my investor, which is my spouse, opposed to just trying to save a buck and letting you do what you want to do. And if anything, what you're doing sounds shady to me. And I don't think you should be allowed to be out here on the market doing this. Because what's going to happen is, if you keep undercutting this place that I'm used to going to and getting these assurances, then and everybody believes that you're okay and you're allowed to do this, you're going to undercut the business that I feel more comfortable with, and then you're going to replace them. And I don't know if I want you replacing them. Because what you're doing seems shady. You seem shady when it comes to orchestrating this type of deal. And I don't want you replacing them for your shady activity. So now I'm going to go call consumer advocates agencies or whatever, regulatory bodies, and I'm going to snitch on you. Again, I know I didn't say I was going to give analogies, but I'm trying to break this down in layman's terms the best way that I can. But hopefully you understand why, just because somebody from Activision Blizzard who has an invested interest in this deal says it's better, who cares what they say? I'm going to let the regulatory bodies decide that, okay? So again, Sony said the deal is inadequate. They also stated that Microsoft could use their ownership to give Sony inferior versions. A lot of people laughed at that and said, oh, this sounds desperate. I'm not too sure about that. And I actually am surprised that it took Sony this long to argue this case, but this is what I'm basing it off of. This is something that I've been watching. Sony concerned Microsoft could knowingly or not knowingly sabotage Call of Duty on PlayStation. This is based upon conversations, first and foremost, of Microsoft they're putting more resources on their version of the product to tighten it up. And they may think, well, we're just doing it to tighten it up on their end. It's going to be cool on their end. They don't need these resources where they might need them. So that's the inadvertent part, the unknown, not knowingly. But the purposeful part is when, I think his name is Tim Martin, I can't remember the CFO of Xbox, when Bethesda was doing its thing as far as being absorbed by Microsoft, he went on and said, well, we don't want to make their content exclusive. We're rather looking at probably just making it first or better on Microsoft. On Microsoft ecosystem. That's the intentional part. So Sony is saying, being that they even put that in the ethos, why would we trust them? There are major competitor. This, again, all analysts have said is the first thing the analysts drew from is them putting this first exclusively or better on PlayStation. That's the first thing, the knee-jerk reactions from the analysts. They told y'all before on prior deals, oh, we ain't got no incentive to do that. And then that's as soon as the deal was announced, that's when Phil Spencer got on the interwebs and said that that's what they were going to do. So that's our other concern. So that's Sony's argument. I'm going to get into the regulators portion of this. I'm going to get into Microsoft's portion of this after I get to these comments, because you guys have been very patient and I appreciate that. Let me get to y'all comments. And Cold Blood is flooding the comments as expected. He says his articulation, meaning, I guess, Forge Gaming's Orlando, I believe that's his name. Forge Gaming, I think is the brand. His articulation makes me go to sleep in comparison to comparing Sony to McDonald's, just blasphemy. That's the point. That's going into the weeds. I'll try to put it as nice as I can. That's going into the weeds. When you're giving an analogy like that, he prefaced it with, look, you guys are not understanding what's going on here. So because you're not understanding what's going on here, let me use popular brands that you are familiar with and try to get you to understand the correlation of the things that those brands serve and how if something similar happened to them, why they would react to the same. It's not saying that Sony is on the same ethical terms or twists, or it has the same talent levels of McDonald's, or they're serving the same good as No! Understand the context. It is using familiar brands, a scenario that hopefully, because fast food is just the easiest scenario to break down and understand. And when I see people looking at McDonald's net worth or talking about, I like 2 slices of cheese rolled in my hand before I have a Pepsi, so I don't know what this means. No! That's where your business acumen is lacking so much that you can't understand and correlate the simplicity of the analogy. You're confused. You're like, oh no, I don't understand, because you don't have the business acumen to attach to it. So now you're going into the weeds talking about things that have no correlation. The popular brands were used simply because in layman's term, the average consumer should be able to understand that business correlation and then make the correlation on why Sony is doing what they're doing. That's it. It's not saying that McDonald's is as ethical as Sony, or their brand is as impactful as Sony, or no. You can hate McDonald's and love Sony and can understand the analogy being made, even if McDonald's was being used. It could be Arby's. It don't matter. It's just popular brands, popular chains were being used to help understand the correlation in the most layman's terms. But without that business acumen, you can't catch it on to something. It's like trying to take a magnet and put it on something that is not magnetized. That's not a him problem. That's a your business acumen problem. I'll get into that a little bit more later. Says, let the deal go through, make COD exclusive to Xbox and PC, cloud, let it die, and become a mobile app store for Candy Crush. That's it. Now the temperament from that I can get. It's like the hell with this thing. But that's us as a consumer. Sony is not going to let it die, and they got more than enough reason to not let it die. And I'm going to get into that. But the thing that is overwhelming is the reporting on it. Why are we talking about this, me included, much more than we're talking about actual games? Why? This is vaporware right now. It's very big vaporware, but it's not enhancing the improvement of games. We're not talking about the games that are out there. We're not talking about things that are happening now, things that are likely coming, actual things that are in production and going to happen. Like, this is vaporware right now. This could go either way. Why are we so focused on this? I totally agree with that sentiment. And that's what I'm saying. After this, we're pretty much done. We're done. Like, the only thing that matters after this is whether the deal gets accepted or it doesn't. And we're operating as if the deal has been mentioned, but it's not accepted or denied, and we're only focusing on things that are actually in the pipeline. Meaning, I'll put it like this: we're focused on gaming deals that are approved. Meaning, this game is coming out and it's, and it's in production. This game is coming out and it's being published by those are deals that have been approved, and those are in the pipeline. This ain't even in the pipeline yet. It'll be in the pipeline when it's approved. If it doesn't get approved, it's not in the pipeline. So we're not focusing on it after this. That's the way I look at it. All right. Next, my brother has up here. And even if Burger King 2, Xbox, hell no, their food, I don't like the Xbox game. Again, we're not making the correct correlations. This is not a correlation between actual Burger King and McDonald's activity in comparison to PlayStation activity. Popular brands, popular goods were used because of the correlation of their attachment to their business, and how you should be able to correlate that to why Sony is doing what they're doing. You can swap it, and you can have the same effect on the analogy and the same accuracy on the analogy. You can use Rally's, Arby's, whoever. If you have a company, two companies that utilize a certain product, and that product is a major component of their global offerings altogether, and that's being disrupted because a competitor is taking that product that is key to your global offerings and saying, now we're going to own that. That is reason for concern, and that's reason for scrutiny under regulatory law. Whether you as a gamer that do not have the business acumen to know that, because your lack of experience with the law and the regulatory bodies in this realm, that's whether you have that, whether you understand it or not. And in some cases where we've had content creators say, well, this content creator said it sounds stupid too. Both of you are ignorant. Who cares? It doesn't matter, but I'm getting to that shortly. So again, it's a false equivalency. It says Call of Duty died for me with Warzone, and I get that, but it's not dead for PlayStation. And if you were to take the potential 20% loss, I think if my numbers are accurate, if you were to write Sony a check for the 20% loss and go into an agreement that you're going to continue to compensate them for the potential 20% loss, then they would care that it's dead to you. But they have a fiduciary responsibility to their investors, and that's why they don't care. And I'm not trying to be mean. It's just the way that it is. He says Z has more integrity than Reforge. I don't understand. I don't understand that. All right, let me put it to you like this. Say you see a blind person. I mean, they're not a blind person. Say you see a literate person on the street and they point to a stop sign and says, that says stop. If you can read, then you understand they're actually right. They must be informed. And what that says, and it says stop. Somehow, even though they can't read, they have some type of understanding of what that says for whatever reason. But if you can't read as well, you may be skeptical. Understandably so. Because you're like, you can't read. How do you know that says stop? And the reason why I brought that up to that comment is I don't know Reforge's gaming integrity in entirety. I just know, due to my business experience, that what he's saying is 1,000% right. And he's explaining it in a way that if you have any correlation to business, or you're willing to do the research to understand it better, as you should as a gamer, because as a gamer, reasonably you're making purchases, you are acting as a consumer, which puts you in the whole business realm of this. He's explaining it in layman's terms that totally just squashes the false rhetoric that's out there. I'm giving him credit for understanding, regardless of what his reading comprehension is, that he recognizes that sign says stop. I don't know his integrity. I don't know any of that. I can vouch for Z's. Yes, I can definitely vouch for Z's. That's why he's a mentor of mine. But that has no correlation to what he's saying being factual or not. And I'm not out here selling Reforged t-shirts or even selling his coffee that he exhibits on his show. I am sitting there saying simply that there is a source you can go to get factual, really absorbable, and of the best absorbable layman explanation of what's going on. And he happens to be that person to do it. He gets it when it comes to this. That's it. He's no messiah. He doesn't have extra integrity points that I'm not guessing them. I want to be acclimated to people that understand traffic signs. Let's put it like this. I know, and I keep using analogies, but maybe I shouldn't. But I want to know what traffic signs mean. And amongst the field of illiterate people, he may be literate. He may be half illiterate or not that good reader, but at least, but he's proven to know, or I'll put it like this. You got someone that you care about driving in a car, going to different places. due to an emergency. They normally don't drive, and let's just say they're illiterate too. And you happen to see this guy, and he knows what the signs say. Everybody else around you, is illiterate. They don't know what the signs say. What I'm saying is, on this particular issue, on knowing the signs and what they mean, I trust him guiding somebody that you care about. If I'm not available, or if I can't do it for some reason, I trust this guy to guide them in regards to that, to traffic signs. I don't know if he's a great literary teacher or what. I don't know that stuff. I just know everybody else that's in this vicinity don't understand what the signs mean. He does. And I know for sure because let's just say I'm a traffic cop. So I know what the signs mean definitively. I can vouch for myself. But at least what the signs mean, I know that guy knows it. That's all. He's not a messiah or anything like that. And of course, he's not more important to any mentor of mine. Not at all. That's in the same vein as that. You're still using false comparisons. It doesn't matter if Coke is bigger. The reason why Coke was being used is because Coca-Cola is served in any of those restaurants. And Coca-Cola that's being served in any of those restaurants. I don't know if Faygo's in your region, Cold Blood. Faygo, for crying out loud. If Faygo happened to be a vital component of a Happy Meal, Faygo Pop was a vital component of a Happy Meal, was a vital component of the BK meal, and then BK was able to buy Faygo, of course McDonald's would be concerned and say, hey, you're a direct competitor of ours. You're going to disrupt our profitability, and there's a risk of you hampering consumer choice, because what you may do across the sector is put serious restraints or even limit anybody else's ability to get Faygo Pop anywhere besides Burger King. I'm going to the regulators. It's as simple as that. It's as simple. You got to be able to put guardrails around the analogy to understand why it don't matter whose size of who's what. If Burger King's meat is made out of horse meat or tuna fish, it doesn't matter. But we're having problems with this because we don't have the proper business acumen. And I'm telling you, this is why gaming is declining. Because we don't understand why the wool is being pulled over our eyes until it's already pulled. It doesn't matter. The brands were used because they're popular brands. There's a certain transactional, that's the word I want to use, transactional correlation to Coca-Cola being sold in Burger King and McDonald's. And if Burger King was able to take Coca-Cola or Faygo, whatever it is, and now be in total control over it. That's it. All right, let me continue on, because I explained a lot of this in detail. So, the regulators, what they've done to this point is they have cited or they've expressed, the EU, let's take the EU first, for example. The EU has originally expressed concerns of the deal from Sony's perspective. However, it's being reported through Reuters and other places that now that their focus is simply on the cloud. So that's kind of like where EU may be. And I should have predicated with this. We don't know where any of these companies are going to land. They're making decisions right now. Right. That's why I said this is vaporware and really doesn't deserve the attention that we're getting. I get where people are keeping an eye and regular updates on it, but this thing being, it doesn't deserve to be talked about daily. Hell no. I think what's happening now, and again, credit to Reforged Gaming in this regard, is that people up to this point have been looking at this totally wrong. And he's helping to get people refocused on this properly, because I'm going to get to it by the time I get to the end of this. It's going to be heavily important to understand this properly because it has serious ramifications on gaming. And a lot of you that love the quality that PlayStation presents, that quality is at risk. And you can say, oh, no, it's not at risk. I'm going to believe the company that makes said quality and why they're jumping up and down about this deal. I'm going to believe them over you. I'm going to believe the maker over the conjector. Let's continue on. CMA has expressed a lot of concerns coming from Sony as well. It's kind of hard to say where they're at as well. Now, the FTC has been very vocal on this. The FTC is suing to block the deal, and chief among their concerns is acquiring, quote unquote, it's Microsoft acquiring. Hold on one second. Hold on, I'll be right back. Okay, sorry about that. I thought somebody was about to get Swiss cheesed up. Let me get back here. Thought my house alarm was going off. Something outside. Somebody was about to get Swiss. Let me stop. Let me not say that loud over here. Anywho, FTC again. Their concerns is Microsoft acquiring and using gaming content to suppress competition from rival consoles. And FTC ain't pulling that part out of their ass. I've talked to people close to Microsoft that want this deal to go through, who said the same reason, the reason why Microsoft did this. And they normally, and they formally did this to thwart Amazon and Google in getting a stranglehold in the AAA gaming market. When Phil, one of the things that you can believe from Phil is when he said that they were staying up at night worried about Amazon and Google. That was the truth. And they've been trying to demonize them. It's worked with Google. Google assisted in some of that, particularly now that they've shut down Stadia. And they made the Bethesda acquisition at first and other acquisitions to send a message to them to say, look, you guys are new in this game. You got to establish relationships. Even if you are going to make your own games, you got to establish relationships. And we're going to kill that opportunity. We get it. Your platform performs better than our cloud platform. But we got the tenure here. We got the relationships. And we got public perception on our side because you guys are newbies. For those that are interested in cloud gaming, we'll just smother you out. And the exact phrase that was given to me by, again, people close to Microsoft who agree with this deal. Why bother? That's the psychology that they want Amazon and Google to have. And it seems like that ultimately Google succumbed to that. And look, through Ubiquitous or whatever the hell that company, that cloud company's name is, they're getting what they wanted. That's why Google and NVIDIA, I think, jointly went after and expressed concerns to FTC about this deal because they wanted a piece of the pie. NVIDIA wanted a piece of the pie directly. Google wanted a piece of the pie because they just signed a deal and revealed it yesterday about them doing business with Ubiquitous, the cloud or whatever the name is, the cloud company that is working with Nintendo to deliver Nintendo's cloud service out of Japan. That company out of Japan. So now Google gets what they want. NVIDIA gets what they want. Where originally both NVIDIA and Google didn't complain about the deal. Now we know why Google didn't complain about the deal. Google didn't complain about the deal because Google at some point in time, directly before these complaints were being filed and stuff like that, they were planning to shut down Stadia. NVIDIA, again, they said, we don't pretty much, want to block the deal, but we got concerns because where's it going to leave us? Also, chief among FTC issues are that they've been asking Xbox about these deals, these deals that they're putting first and foremost as a remedy regarding Call of Duty and whatever. They want to see these 10-year deals, and they've asked Xbox for these 24 times, and Xbox has denied. And Xbox's response, which is bewildering, you don't need this. You don't need this. You don't need this. It's going to be interesting to see how that all plays out. And lastly, the FTC scrutinizes the change in tone from Microsoft when Microsoft first said that the Bethesda games, there was no incentive to keep Bethesda projects off of competing consoles. And then Phil basically said, that's what, this deal was about exclusive content. Now, Microsoft, in turn to all this, they have offered multiple 10-year agreements with platform holders of Call of Duty. They've made multiple deals with cloud platformers such as Ubiquitous or whatever the hell their name is, NVIDIA and Boosteroid. And Microsoft has argued, right? They first argued heavily and forcefully that the CMA is just adopting Sony's rhetoric for its concerns. And that's a problem. So that's where we stand as far as the deal being announced and the aftermath of the deal. So now let's talk about why the main reason why people are ignorant to what all this means. All right. So many gamers have heard the arguments from the UK, from EU, from FTC, and from Sony. And they have said things like, oh, these regulators are biased against Xbox. FTC in particular doesn't have a case. They don't know what they're talking about. Sony has pathetic arguments as far as voicing their concerns over this deal. So let's address these. First, let's look at understanding the role of the regulators in the business. Okay, and I'm going to focus on CMA and FTC. I'm going to focus on them too. The EU is kind of like in limbo, and it's a more positive thing where gamers that are yelling these crazy things aren't focused on EU so much, but they're focused on CMA and FTC. So let's go there. So CMA is responsible for enforcing antitrust laws and regulating mergers and acquisitions within UK. All right. In the context of international mergers, CMA, or mergers that really affect UK business, CMA evaluates whether the mergers will lead to a significant lessening of competition in the UK market. If CMA believes a merger would result in anti-competitive effects, it may impose remedies or attempt to block the merger altogether. This is important because mergers that lead to reduced competition can harm consumers and stifle innovation. So that's their approach. First here is, how is this affecting other businesses, and how is this merger going to affect other businesses in that region? Because our feeling is from a top-down scope. This is very important to understand. For those of you ignorant to how business works, these regulatory bodies look at it from a top-down approach. They feel that when we allow more businesses to operate and have a competitive edge, that all ultimately trickles down to the consumers. That's their approach. It's not a bottom up, what is the consumer's understanding of this? Therefore, businesses comply. No, it's from a top down perspective. You got to understand that part. Now I'll talk about the FTC. Similarly, the FTC enforces antitrust and consumer protection laws affecting virtually every area of commerce within the United States. The FTC evaluates the competitive effects of international mergers that have an impact on the U.S. market. And in 2021, they formulated multilateral task forces and stuff like that, as well as with other relevant markets in regards to competitive concerns that mergers, let's say in the pharmaceutical area, how that would affect, again, from a top-down perspective, how that would affect those type of businesses. First, again, from a top-down perspective, how does it affect those businesses that want to interact in that sector? Because the belief is a trickle-down effect that is going to ultimately affect consumers' choice. Not what do consumers think is a good choice, therefore businesses have to operate from that scope first. That's not how it works. Therefore, this shows the FTC recognizes the importance of cooperating with other regulatory bodies to ensure that mergers do not harm consumers or competition. So that's why you see consistent. Hold on one second. I got contractors coming left and right here. And I just want to make sure that I get this done. That's why I had to do this at a certain time, and I kept pressing this back. Okay, that's not one of the contractors. Cool. So really, CMA, FTC play crucial roles in evaluating and regulating international mergers to prevent anti-competitive effects which can harm consumers and innovation in their regions. Their efforts ensure that international mergers do not lead to monopolies which can stifle competition and limit consumer choices. That's the purpose of the FTC. That's the purpose in a lot of ways of CMA, and it's from a top-down perspective. So when you come into realization of that, right? When you realize what their purpose is, then it should be more clear that the FTC don't care if you are a fanboy on Twitter and want to argue someone, or want to out-argue someone rather, whose platform is the best. And therefore, if this business deal goes through, that helps your argument and makes you right on Twitter and gets you more followers. FTC and CMA don't care about that. They also don't care that you're a content creator riding the wave of Xbox-based content on social media, and this deal going through would blow you into the stratosphere astronomically, raising your super chat, your members, and the likes. They don't care about that. They don't even care, based upon what we just covered on what their responsibilities are. They don't even care if you own an Xbox. And this deal simply provides a cheaper way for you to play Call of Duty or the Activision Blizzard games. They don't care about that. Again, because their perspective is from a top down. They care about choice. That's it. Primarily choice, leading to more options and consumer prosperity. That is their culture. That's what they regulate from. They don't care if Xbox is a feasible choice for you, and therefore this makes you having an Xbox more lucrative. They don't care about that. The purpose of these regulatory bodies is to ensure, again, mergers don't lead to anti-competitive practices amongst companies, and it doesn't result in outcomes that limit choice amongst consumers or gamers in this case. So once you understand that litmus and understand that it is more important to these regulatory bodies, even over, I can now get Call of Duty cheaper on Xbox, you must understand the culture around the thinking of regulators, around instances not definitively spelled out in law. There is law around this stuff, but cases like this, it's not definitive immediately by looking at the law books on which way to go. That's why they're going through this process, to look at the law in relation to their purpose and see if there is too much of a potential of monopolistic behavior to be allowed here. That's their purpose. And before a business deal of this nature can be put and signed into ink or signed into existence, they have to pass that scratch and sniff test from these regulatory bodies. Hopefully now that makes a little bit more sense. They don't go to a gamer, oh, you got an Xbox, this is going to make it better for you. All right, let's put this deal through. Does this deal affect choice? By first primarily affecting the ability of companies to operate in that sector. Now you may think, oh no, it doesn't because XYZ and somebody else might, but that's what has to be looked at. They don't look at it from a bottom-up perspective. So again, you must understand the culture around the thinking of regulators, around instances not definitively spelled out in law, not just the meaning of legalese and the interpretation of what one legal representative's thoughts are on an outcome. The best way, again, here goes another analogy. The best way to look at it is, it's like being a parent. And say you have one child who out-argues the other. But if the better arguing child is making argument based on flawed principles that go against your culture, what you culturally believe as a parent, and the foundation you have set, for instance, I think my portions of dinner should be more than my siblings because I'm hungrier. Thus, they're overweight. And as a parent, you're concerned about your child being overweight. So you're like, you made a compelling argument, but these are the principles on why the rules are what they are, and this totally goes against our principles. Why I parent the home the way that we parent this home. So regardless of how compelling your argument is, goes against our principles. You are then put in a position where you may override that child's arguments, regardless of how compelling it sounds, how he or she caveated certain things that you've done in the past. Well, you snuck me a piece of chicken. You gave me an extra piece of chicken the other day. You gave me 3 pieces of chicken when you only gave them 2. And maybe you did do that, but maybe it's because nobody else wanted any more chicken. You didn't want it to go to waste. And that is despite whether that child has friends from the outside screaming in her favor, yeah, give her more chicken. There's a culture, there's a set of principles that is outlined in the law for the more definitive and easily, you can't do this. You can't do that. But the things that are not so easily defined, that require extensive processes, of course you're going to have legal bodies argue in this way or that way. You can find lawyers that can argue up anything. That's their job. Even if they know that their client is guilty, they will argue in that client's favor if the client want to argue not guilty. So directly pointing to a legal body's interpretation of something means nothing. It's ultimately up to the regulatory body and how they look at the body of work and what's being argued. That's another reason why I'm over this. So you zealots in favor of the deal that say, oh, these arguments are stupid or they don't make any sense, you're basing that on people who have an agenda to argue it that way. Either because they personally favor Xbox and they're just using their legal expertise of understanding legalese to make it sound tangible to you. But again, you lack the business acumen to look at this holistically, so it doesn't matter. I will never just go from one legal person's perspective on something. I will use them to help me understand precedent and understand options. But if a legal person says, no, this is what's going to happen, if that is not the precedent every time that thing has been proposed, or there isn't a lot of precedent out there, I'm not following what they're saying wholeheartedly. I may take it into consideration. It's going into the pot of other things that are sound as well, if that's sound. But listening to one person's biased view of this and getting their just because you're getting legalese interpreted to you means nothing. It's ultimately up to the regulators, who not only go by law when things are more definitive and they do it easily, but when things are not more definitive, they go through a process, which you're seeing now. And if this was so definitively stupid of Sony to argue, then the whole process would be over with by now. But apparently the regulators who run the culture think not. So it goes through the process. And it goes through the process regardless of what you think, because you don't know nothing. So let's talk about that as far as the arguments that are being put out there, and let's give you Sony's perspective. We know Microsoft's perspective. A lot of the journos out there are highlighting Microsoft's perspective. This is stupid. This is desperation. We've heard that. Let's give you the counter to that. That's more feasible. Let's give you Sony's perspective. Not saying it's gospel, but let's give you the sound perspective as far as the whys that Sony is doing this. All right. If this precedent is set, what prohibits Microsoft from being able to buy up and control more third parties that are vital to Sony's business? I've talked about this in previous podcasts. Sony operates off of a model that all the people in this space operate off of. We create a box or an ecosystem for you to interact with games. In order to get you to indulge in our ecosystem, we create exclusive titles that differentiates us from our competitors. Sony has broken this down as long ago as 2014. They said, look, out of every 10 exclusives that we create, maybe only 3 of them are successful. That's a 70% failure rate that they're willing to endure as it relates to the number of exclusives they put out. 70% failure rate financially that they're willing to endure title to title to try to hook you to their box. But those 3 titles that they are successful with they're so successful that they cover the costs of doing so. But that's not it. Then what happens is that once you do decide to go with their ecosystem, then you go get the games, the biggest multiplats that are out there, the Call of Duties, the Fortnites, and the likes. And that really puts them over the top. And because, in their not business model, because people say the content that separates PlayStation from its competitor Microsoft is so much better. Like, they both have the same multiplats, but their content in totality is so much better because of those exclusives. I'd rather be in that ecosystem. And that commonly means, more often than not in current day, I'd rather buy their console. And years down the line, it may mean I might sign up for PlayStation Cloud more, but right now it means I'm going to buy their console more than I'm going to buy Xboxes. So the exclusives are a vital part of setting that foundation. But the thing that makes the business lucrative for not only Sony, but its investors, is the fact that A, they got so many boxes out there, that B, so many people are going to buy Call of Duty, get Fortnite skins and the likes on their box, going to play Madden, FIFA on their box, opposed to the Xbox. So Sony's true concern, that's why I said I don't fall for everything in regards to Call of Duty. I think they'll take a significant hit with Call of Duty, even if they do agree to a 10-year deal. I think people are going to say, well, look, if I can get a day and date and Game Pass for only $15 a month, I'll just go play it on Xbox. I think that's going to cast a significant hit, but we'll get into more of that later. But because of that dynamic, if you allow this is $70 billion we're talking about. This is larger than the gross domestic product of some countries. $70 billion. This is not a small deal, and Sony cannot hang in that realm. So Sony's argument is, if you allow this deal to go through, you're allowing Microsoft to single-handedly change the dynamic of how this business works, and you allow them to change it not to where they just have an advantage, but only in a way that only they can operate, because nobody else in this business has the capacity to buy a company for $70 billion. And that's why we predicated our business on our exclusives and so forth, because generally nobody has the ability to pay to buy an Activision Blizzard. It's just not possible. Not a platform maker or a platform holder. You could have had other businesses go to buy it, but they're not in the space. So we predicated a lot of our business on creating a box that will be in more homes so people can play the biggest game of arguably the last few decades, Call of Duty, on our box. That's their argument, and they're submitting proof to support that argument. So based upon everything that we've talked about previously in this podcast, that argument makes sense. It's not desperate. It makes sense based upon the fact that on the announcement of the deal alone, based upon the fact that analysts who had an effect on what happened the day that deal was announced, based upon the fact that Sony lost $20 billion in market value on the same things that they're arguing now, makes their argument make perfect sense. Really, I could have ended the podcast an hour and a half ago. But we're going to give sight to the blind. Another contention from Sony is that what if I don't, from a consumer perspective? Now, this is Sony trying to argue on behalf of the consumer. You could say if this argument is genuine or not, if they don't really care, if maybe they do care, who knows? I'm not willing to say one way or the other. Who knows? I'm not going to sit there and totally buy that they care about this, but I know that this is an effective argument based upon what the regulators look at, and being that they want this deal shut down because of how it's being offered to them and how it's going to affect them as it's designed. This is an effective argument. It is not a desperate argument. For the consumer, Sony also is arguing, well, what if you're a consumer that doesn't generally like the Xbox ecosystem? What if that you prefer the PlayStation ecosystem, but you prefer it in large part due to Call of Duty and their exclusives? And what if now you still prefer PlayStation? You still say you're going to get a PlayStation, but now you're made to make further investments in Xbox. You got to spend more money because definitively you love the PlayStation exclusives, but you got to have Call of Duty. So now this deal has essentially put up another paywall to that consumer choice. It has drastically and negatively impacted that consumer choice, because I was just fine with the game being available on PlayStation. But now that it's going to be under Microsoft, oh man, I don't know. Is Microsoft going to, now you're concerned about the viability of the product being handled by the competitor. And what if Microsoft does something where they're like, it's coming first to us or something like that? That again, that makes that involvement in the Xbox ecosystem when you normally wouldn't do it. What if it makes it more plausible? Oh man, I saw reviews and Call of Duty is buggy as hell on PlayStation. Now I gotta get it on Xbox. Damn, now I gotta spend more money. You know what I'm saying? So now they're trying to argue it from the consumer's perspective, which again, how authentic they are in that outside of their own business needs, who knows? But again, it's an argument that is an enticing one for regulators. Right? Now, how has Sony backed up these concerns? The analyst comments. They've basically ripped what the analyst said the day of the deal and turned it into an argument from them. And they have the backing of the disruption for the simple fact they lost $20 billion in market value when it was announced. But they didn't stop there. They've done studies. CMA has done studies. And they've submitted statements using Xbox's own behavior and words against them when it came to Bethesda. Remember, we have no incentive in relation to Bethesda in exclusive content to Phil going, in that video and saying this deal was about exclusive content to Game Pass or wherever you can play Game Pass. Now let's better go. Let's try to better now that we've understand the argument, the purpose of the argument, and why the arguments are crafted the way that they are because of the culture of the regulatory bodies that are going to examine these arguments and make a decision. Let's now better understand why really it's imperative for Sony to try to block this deal. We do so by understanding fiduciary responsibility. Something I'm quite familiar with. Let me try again the best way that I can to break it down for you. As a publicly traded company, fiduciary duties to investors from a business require acting in the best interest, quote unquote. That's an actual term when in relation to fiduciary responsibilities. Acting in the best interest, including disclosing relevant information that could impact the company's value. In the case of noticing a deal from a competitor that could harm the company's business, the company has a responsibility to inform investors of potential risks and, here we go, take steps to mitigate any negative impact. Examples of a fiduciary duty a company has to its investors is the duty of, quote unquote, loyalty, which requires the company's directors and officers to act in good faith and in the best interest of the shareholders. Companies must disclose all material information that could affect the company's financial performance, including information related to competitors' deals. The company also has a duty of care, which requires its directors and officers to make informed decisions by conducting thorough research and analysis and to use reasonable care when making decisions that affect the company and its shareholders. So, the reason why I spoke of all that is because these things that Jim Ryan are doing or saying, or that Sony's saying and doing in relation to this deal is something that is done in tandem with the expectations of their investors, because they have the fiduciary legal responsibility to look out for them. And this is atypical of what a company who has done reports and analysis. Sony can't just go out there and say, you know what, we think this is going to hurt us. We think this is going to hurt us, so I want to go out here and say this about this deal and put us all in the spotlight for this. No, Sony has to prove to its investors why they need to block the deal if the investors haven't already stated so. And they, in tandem, have to show data and analysis, even if the investor said, you need to block this deal. Sony needs to come up with data and analysis to concur or to say, you know what? That is a concern of yours, but hey, here's why it shouldn't be a concern. So Sony doesn't do that in a biased fashion. Sony has to look at everything that's on the table, do analysis, and come up with a conclusion of all the analysis. And just like the analysts who don't have a dog in the race, who said this is going to be a major blow to Sony, who then flooded the market with their apprehension of Sony's standing if the deal is approved, who then affected the fact that they lost $20 billion in market revenue or market value, based upon that apprehension. They've also said, for the same exact reasons again, that this is a harm. And analysts don't just roll a magic 8-ball and say, is this going to be good or bad? They come up, they get paid millions of dollars to come up with data and analysis as well. All right. Now, if Sony were to listen to you all, right? Let me put something up here on the screen. Can I find this tweet? Oh yeah, here it goes. This is purebred insanity. Again, from what I'm hearing from people. Let's put this tweet up here on the screen. This is a tweet that I put up here because people were like, oh, yeah, Sony sounds pathetic. This is stupid. Why are they block? They shouldn't block this deal. They have no standing to block this deal. Even if it is going to affect them financially, figure it out. I put this up here. Imagine investors. And this is a supposed conversation between the investors and Jim Ryan. Investors, we noticed a 20% drop in third-party sales. Jim, oh yeah, it was because of the Microsoft Activision deal. Investors, Jim, did we try any heavy pushback on this? It's killing profit margins. Jim, oh no, they said I might look desperate on Twitter, and I didn't want that smoke. Hashtag not how it works. However, unfortunately, to many of you think those are the steps that Sony should have taken. That's the precaution that Sony should have been concerned about instead of the investor concerns. Let me explain to you what would happen if they follow your silly advice. If a company fails to fulfill its fiduciary duties, guess what can happen? Shareholders can take legal action against the company for breach of fiduciary duty. I've seen a lot of ignorant folks out there after Reforged Gaming, and I give credit where credit is due. And he deserves a lot of it for breaking this down and understanding how this works. For him saying that or implying that, I've seen this, and this is the part that ticked me off, and honestly the part that motivated this video or this podcast or my entire focus on the business aspects of gaming with this podcast. Too many people said that's not true. Even if Jim Ryan suffered from anxiety, and let's just say in his heart of hearts, he didn't want to do this. Already knowing the evidence is already there. The evidence is already there. Sony lost $20 billion just by the deal being announced. The analysts that had an effect on that happening said, oh my, Sony in trouble. $20 billion in market revenue was lost just by the deal being announced. So even if Jim Ryan suffered from anxiety and doesn't want to be out in the public eye like this, he has no choice, or he better quit. It's as simple as that. I can give you examples of companies or investors suing over the lack of fiduciary responsibilities. There's Signacor versus Audex Health Systems. That was, I think, judged out of Delaware, where there wasn't such disclosure in regards to a merger. And I don't think, in looking at former precedents, this wasn't a 1v1 match of what's going on with Sony and Microsoft, but it just shows you, for those that doubt who say it, I wanted to point this out as an example because so many people said, oh no, you can't sue. If investors can't do that. Yes, they can. So many of you act like you're getting paid off of dividends or something. I don't even know if Microsoft pays out dividends, but you're getting a check for owning or getting some type of financial gain from owning Microsoft stock, but y'all don't understand how the financial sector works at all. So yes, for those zealots that were out there saying, oh no, you can't be sued for something like, yes, you can. And it's not something that Sony can deny. The proof is already out. Just by the announcement of the deal alone, they lost $20 billion in market revenue. And the analysts spoke in detail on why they said Sony's in trouble if this goes through. And that's exactly what you see Sony arguing. Now that we've distinguished why Sony really has no choice but to fight this, and why they're not pathetic or they're grimy in doing so, right? Let me say this. I'm not implying that Microsoft is grimy in actually pursuing this deal. Excuse my French, but shit. If you got $70 billion to buy Activision Blizzard, I'll be buying them up this too. Especially if I'm in Microsoft's place. So yes, yes, because of the position that they're in, because of the lackluster attachment to their library. Even one of the analysts said that they needed this deal because they said Bethesda wasn't enough to help them catch up with PlayStation, that their portfolio is so lackluster in their eyes that they needed this. And if they want to, something that we've always argued here, if they want to expand to the 3 million or 3 billion gamers, 3 billion gamers, they got to at least have a more enticing or an equally as enticing portfolio than Sony. They got to at least do that. So of course, I understand why they're doing this deal. Whether I agree with the deal or not, I understand. But here's where when we look at the terminology, that those of you that lack the business acumen of calling Sony pathetic and Microsoft the saints or whatever, this is where, if you understand business, you'll understand that from a cultural aspect, just by the dynamics of this deal, the empathy, regulatory wise, is in the favor of Sony. I'm not saying, again, don't take this as me saying that the deal, that Sony it got a better argument in the deal. I'm not saying that. But there's going to be a more empathetic nature to Sony's situation in this deal than Microsoft's because of the regulatory culture. When you look at why these regulatory bodies even exist. Explain it to you this way. It all boils down to this. I want to contrast for you a business's responsibility to protect profits over maximizing profits. Oh, damn, MM2K, you did too much business talk. I can't handle this. I liked it better when Lando was talking about McDonald's and Coca-Cola. Now you're going to get this work. Y'all got to get smarter at this. It's too idiotic out here. Again, to help you better understand why the regulatory bodies would pump the brakes and show a little bit more, for lack of a better term, compassion to Sony's argument, even if they end up siding with Microsoft. It all boils down to protecting profits opposed to maximizing profits. Let me give it to you from, I wouldn't say the CMA and the FTC's angle, and why. And I believe the Reuters reports, because they're more likely to do so opposed to EU, even though EU can be tough cookies too. But there's more legal dialogue from the CMA and from the FTC, I'll put it like this. There's more legal dialogue from those entities' origins out of the US and out of UK that heavily looks over protecting profits opposed to maximizing profits. There's a lot of verbiage about that out there to where it's understandable why EU may be loosening up a little bit opposed to the FTC and the CMA still being a little bit firmer and being skeptical. Let's break it down. The legal obligations of businesses towards their investors may vary depending upon the jurisdiction and the specific circumstances, as I just explained. Generally, businesses have a fiduciary duty to act in the best interest of their shareholders and exercise reasonable care, skill, and diligence in managing the company's affairs. However, now that part speaks to protecting. Now we're going to talk about maximizing profits. However, it is worth noting that there is still debate out there about whether corporations have a legal obligation to maximize profits. Many argue that corporations should have a broader social responsibility considering the well-being of their stakeholders, including employees, customers, and the environments, rather than just maximizing profits for their shareholders. So in summary, businesses have a legal obligation to act in the best interest of their shareholders, but the specific nature of this obligation may vary depending upon the circumstances in the jurisdiction. Additionally, there are specific laws and regulations that businesses must follow to protect consumers and investors. So what does that mean? That means that these regulatory bodies, I would say more so FTC. Hold on one second. All right, let me start wrapping this up because I think these mammy jammies just hit my house. They're cutting this tree next door. I just heard a loud thud. I'm like, what the hell? And I see a limb close to my house. I got to make sure it didn't hit my roof or damage anything. So anywho, so let's start wrapping this up. So now, okay, and let me just say this. When you look at it, oh, hold on, let me get back in. When you look at it, you can say that Sony is protecting its profits where Microsoft is maximizing its profits. Nothing wrong with maximizing, but when you have contention between two parties and the argument is, well, this is going to maximize my profits versus the party that says, well, this is going to harm me, protecting our profits, precedent at the beginning is going to lean towards those that can feasibly prove that there's reason for concern that something is going to harm against the protection of profits. And because that is at the core of Sony's argument, that's why they're getting the opportunity to speak, air their grievances, and why maybe some, if a large portion of the CMA's arguments were similar to what Sony was saying. That's just the culture and the nature of how the regulatory bodies work. By you not understanding the law, to you it sounds stupid, but it's business. So Sony's not doing anything out of the ordinary that another company wouldn't do under the same circumstances. They're actually using the same argument that other analysts that don't have a horse in this race have used to summarize the issues that Sony would have if this deal went through. You got to get your business acumen up to better understand it, because of the things that I'm going to get to very shortly. Point blank, Sony has raised enough argument points to show legally an attempt to protect profits from an arguably monopolistic business merger. Not saying that that's going to be the final result, but that's what they're arguing. And apparently they've set up enough evidence to where that's a concern. Because, well, let me put it like this. To call effective arguments that succeed in providing enough data and history towards said company that's being considered to execute monopolistic behavior in the deal that they propose is totally ignorant to business and regulatory culture. Again, I'm not saying that they don't have the right, Microsoft doesn't have the right to do this, but the fact that this is getting scrutinized, whether a lot of it is based on Sony's arguments or not, to call that desperate is silly. It's beyond silly. I'm using nice terms here. The fact of the matter is that there is enough of a legal foundation presented by Sony. Well, not just presented by Sony, but presented by everybody all around to consider the deal, right? Consider the deal in the favor of Microsoft, but to do so with concessions in large part, possibly due to concerns raised by Sony. All right. So basically, with all the evidence that we provided, all the things that we've talked about from a surface level about business and about the responsibilities of these regulatory bodies, to anybody that has basic comprehension, I feel like we've done a good job here of breaking that down to you. Now that we've done that and we've said, look, There is a reason why. There is a very feasible reason why Sony is pushing back on this. And Sony is pushing back on it using the arguments that they have. The vast majority of their arguments are based upon what caused them to lose that market value and what caused analysts to go, uh-oh, Sony. Doesn't mean that Microsoft is wrong in pursuing this deal. Hell yeah. Makes perfect sense. Especially when you hear the history of how this deal came about. Again, there's not a legal responsibility to maximize profits. But let's just say if investors would have found out that that Microsoft had an opportunity to buy Activision Blizzard and they didn't attempt. I don't think there would have been enough legal precedent for them to be sued under that, because again, the litmus is protecting investments opposed to maximizing it. But you would have had a lot of investors, I feel, on the Microsoft behalf. Even though that's a substantial amount, $70 billion, you may have had some key investors give Microsoft some grief for not pursuing it. So of course, it makes sense. Both actions make sense, is the argument here. So now that we've cleared that up, I feel, now let's go to the infamous analogy. And again, we're going to use fair practice here. That's why I have it on the screen. Let's go. I want to put fair. Where's my fair practice sticker at? Well, I don't have my fair practice sticker. Let's get our fair practice sticker here. Or maybe I have it in a wide body shot. No, I don't. Image. Let's get our fair practice sticker. I'm about to play you some content, fair use. Let's add that. I'm gonna put that right here for now, and then we're gonna get rid of it. All right, fair use. Okay, so I want to play for you guys and gals this clip that is at the heart and soul of the contention, as far as this analogy is concerned. Very simple analogy that wasn't impossible to understand if there indeed was the necessary business acumen bestowed upon gamers. So let's take a look here. Let me do this. Did I not? Don't tell me. Okay. I could have sworn that I bookmarked this. Let me do this again. This is insanity. And there's something going on with Twitter. All right, here we go. Let's try this again. Let's copy the link and then let's bookmark it again. Okay, there we go. All right. So let me do this. I'm going to play for you the clip, the infamous clip, and then I'm going to, again, based off the education that we've provided, over 2 hours and 20 minutes worth, now re-explain to you. You know what I'm saying? Now re-explain to you why the analogy makes perfect sense. Let's do it.
I'm going to help you out because everybody gets off in left field on this. If Burger King was trying to buy Coca-Cola and they were going to give McDonald's a contract that would let McDonald's keep Coca-Cola in their store, in their restaurants, but it was a worse deal than McDonald's has right now, they have every right to reject the offer and also try to block the acquisition. Why? Because Coca-Cola is endemic to the revenue streams of McDonald's, and their competitor buying Coca-Cola could irreparably harm them. So Microsoft trying to buy Call of Duty and Sony saying, listen, we got a great thing going with Call of Duty right now. We don't want this to happen. Oh, well, we'll give you this deal. I don't want your deal. I've got a great deal right now. The whole mentality and the whole narrative of they're scared or they're mad or they're angry or they're crying, you're projecting emotion onto a multi-billion-dollar corporation who is legally obligated to protect its revenue streams, and that's all they're doing. Your inability to see that is your own fault. They're literally doing what they're legally obligated to do. And you can't see that because it's personal. They're mad. They're angry. Why are you talking in personal language like Sony's some petulant child that walked into the room? They're a multi-billion-dollar corporation. Jim Ryan has a legal obligation to do what he is doing. That's what he's required to do it. If he fails to protect the revenue streams and the profit margins of Sony, he could be fired. I'm going to help.
So, you heard it there. Everything that I just spent over 2 hours and 20 minutes explaining, masterfully communicated by Lano, Reforged Gaming, and why it made so much sense to a lot of us. I feel it made sense whether you are for the deal or aren't for the deal. Why it would make sense to you? Because of the things that I spent 2 hours and 20 minutes explaining. Right? So let's recap it. Now this should make more sense. Here's a synopsis of the analogy again. McDonald's, which should be seen as Sony, not realistically in real life, but just in that scenario. All you need to know is that in that scenario of fast food chains serving soda, that's why he used McDonald's and Coca-Cola, because when you're giving analogies, you use prominent brands to help drive home your point, because those prominent brands drive you to the business and what they're doing in layman's terms. Not stuff out in the weeds, not their annual fiscal. That's not layman stuff. The layman stuff is it's a fast food chain that serves pop or soda. Pop is a thing we say here in Pittsburgh. All right. But McDonald's, which should be seen as Sony, just in contrast of that scenario, always was able to negotiate in fair terms its use of Coca-Cola products with its food. The combo made their chains a considerable amount of money. Now that BK Burger King, their main competitor, is bidding for Coca-Cola, they, as in McDonald's, have concerns over the quality of the product offered to them, meaning Coca-Cola, as well as the financial impact of future deals coming from a major competitor now, instead of an independent source. So if they can reasonably show causation of such concerns, the market drops upon the announcement that Burger King bought Coca-Cola. Contrast to what happened to Sony when the Call of Duty deal or the Activision deal was announced, or past history of Burger King going back on their word on other acquisitions that affect the competitors. Think Microsoft and Bethesda when they told regulatories, oh, we have no incentive to do XYZ. Then once the deal goes through, they do what? Or they say that this deal was designed for XYZ. Based upon that proof, they are going to argue, they as in McDonald's, are going to argue against the deal to protect their investors from a substantial, consistent loss. Now, all you got to do, again, you've already been educated. We've replayed the analogy. Now, all you got to do, just based off of that, don't go past them guardrails. Don't go past the education you got today. Don't go past the analogy based upon the layman's situation of a fast food chain simply selling pop, and that pop being that pop being, or that soda rather, being instrumental in their profits because they want that soda with that value meal. And they like that, and that product is key, being combined with that value meal. Now, don't go past those guardrails. Now all you got to do is replace McDonald's with Sony, just in scenario purposes. Replace BK or Burger King with Microsoft, and replace Coca-Cola with Call of Duty. Now it should sink in. Does it? And in the case that it doesn't, then I'm sorry. Simply put, you no longer have any business talking about this deal. Let's just wait for the outcome. Like your discussions, your comments on this deal. If you can't get it after that 2 hours and 20 minutes of education, then we worked on multiple days. We worked over the weekend partially, and then Monday and Tuesday, then even this morning, up into the hours of us going live, working on breaking this down in layman's terms the best way that we could. If you still don't get it, then whenever you hear this still being mentioned, just turn off whatever you're listening to, delete the tweet, block it, mute it, whatever. You have no business discussing this deal. Now, I want to close out with this. Now that we've gotten past all that, and hopefully it makes sense, and hopefully it makes sense to those that didn't understand it before, but now you understand it. I want you to understand that there are those out there that did understand this when they heard it. But again, they have an agenda. Their agenda is, wow, I make Xbox content. Xbox content is blowing up. It is. I foresaw this in talking to someone that I used to make content with. And I told them, I said, you need to start making an Xbox podcast. And they were like, I don't know. And I said, they're like, I don't know. I don't think I have the chops for it. I said, look, you may not glide across the stage like Fred Astaire, like some of these other people. You may not, the charm factor may not be there, but the thing that you have over them is your staunch belief in Xbox, your unwavering belief in Xbox. So even though they may be a little bit more versatile and their charisma on the mic, it doesn't matter. That's not valued over your unwavering defense and platitudes in celebration of Xbox. That's what's valued more. So, because that is uniquely something that you're at the top of the food chain with, and your ability to say, F it, I'll scuffle with the best of the best. I remember I got into it with a major content creator when I was an Xbox fanboy because of this individual. This individual put a Twitter post out there. Another Xbox content creator that's a PlayStation fanboy put a comment out there. I responded to their comment. That created a back and forth between me and this content creator. I made a video about mentioning them at the end of my video. They made a full video versus me. I made a full video versus them. That was all sparked because of that individual. So the fact that there are people that, regardless of communication, regardless of charm factor, and really regardless of the handling of facts, can soar in this business of content creation because you hang firm with a particular logo. And that's more prominent on the Xbox side now more than anything. Trust me, I know. Like there's a fight in the Xbox community, and it's attracted a lot of people to switch sides and now prominently defend Xbox, despite what numbers say or what the average consumer that don't pay attention to any of this silly shit, regardless of what they do. I knew that Xbox was going to be a commodity because that fight was in it. Because I was part of the community. I understood the psychology of the community. And just like I predicted, that person's unwavering adulation for the platform has catapulted them from a spot where we used to have to beg creators to do content on their behalf, where we would go on Twitter and say, look, you're not supporting XYZ person. And not because they didn't have any talent. I don't want to make it sound like I'm saying they didn't have any talent. Absolutely not. I thought that their content was comical, was great. It was in its own lane, regardless if there were other content creators that were more charismatic on the mic. This individual had their own value and their own charm factor built into their dedication to the platform for listeners, right? But despite all that, we went from having to go beg people, look, man, come on, show this person some love, build up the channel, this, that, please. It would mean a lot to us. We went from doing that to them to people begging them now, I would presume, to get on their content, right? Why? Because Xbox content creation is huge. There's people out there that are making fun of the ponies and all that other stuff. They do videos where they call it farming, farming for content. They go farm other content creators for content and take these things that they say and clown the ponies and all the other stuff. Those same people were doing the opposite in favor of PlayStation. And the only thing that's changed, Xbox isn't outperforming PlayStation. They didn't close the gap. It's about to get to the point to where it was the same. Xbox didn't all of a sudden gain games of the year. Halo isn't knocking it out the park and competing with Last of Us, right? Game Pass isn't in every home. Xbox isn't making more money than so. There's nothing that changed besides the fervor behind the Xbox community on social media being so strong that it's attractive to more social media consumers, and it becomes a more lucrative venture for content creators. That's the only thing that's changed. So because that's changed, you've seen the waffling reflect that. It's business. So, and a lot of people understand that it's business. So they have some type of business acumen, maybe not at a Fortune 500 or publicly traded level, but they kind of understand. So there's a lot of people that try to mix and match and mush up this analogy, or I don't understand it. They're saying that. They're only saying that because they have an agenda. They're not here to educate you. They're here to pilfer you. You are a super chat to them. You're a bit to them. You're a Twitch bit to them. Now, people may hear that and say, M2K, well, it's not like you ain't got your stuff behind paywalls. We feel like that, it takes effort to do what we do at certain levels. And we feel that there's a value to it. So we do say, hey, look, there's value to this. We're doing something, or we're communicating in a way, or we're talking about certain things that you're not getting elsewhere. And we do put a value behind that. But if it was all about views over here, I would wholeheartedly reject GFN, reject cloud gaming, and go with PlayStation wholeheartedly. Challenge people on Twitter, make memes about them, and do all that stuff. Because that's you got to do that first and foremost. If you want to see, if you even want to have a chance in most of these lanes. I refuse to do that. Yes, I give kudos to Sony, and I feel like they deserve it. But I'll be first to tell you that my favorite place to play is on NVIDIA GeForce Now. That's unpopular. I defended Stadia. That was unpopular. So because of that, I got to swing the pendulum all the way this way or all the way that way, reject my reality of what I like for gaming, and play that same game that other gamers who have, again, under the pretty much similar circumstances, were swung in the exact opposite pendulum for PlayStation when PlayStation content was the B's G's. Now that Xbox content is the B's G's, they've done a complete 180. I don't play that game. So no, it is not the same. I've had that. Only reason why I brought that up is that I've been accused by, bless their hearts, some of my cloud gaming not cohorts. They don't work with me. I don't work with them. They're not even supporters. But some of the greater cloud gaming community has he went and bought a PlayStation last month, and that's why he's no. You don't know. You don't do the research. You don't have the acumen. You just have this pie in the sky, Mary Poppins belief to gaming. Love everything gaming. No, I've probably been gaming longer than you've been on this planet. And I want to see it continue on a certain trajectory. So that's why I'm critical the way that I am towards Xbox. And that's why, as I'm closing out here, why I don't favor the deal. Here's why I don't favor the deal. And then we're going to close out. I don't favor the deal because I prefer the business model that Sony's doing. That doesn't mean that I don't have appreciation for what Microsoft is trying to do. Microsoft's business model doesn't curb with me all like that, but I have an appreciation for fellow gamers, whether they game the exact same way I do or not. And I've learned to grow that appreciation surprisingly with Stadia. My admiration of Stadia originally was simply based off the delivery method. Was like, I'm done with Xbox. I went to PC. Had just bought a 2070 card fairly recently after launch. Come to find out that the 2070 was obsolete. I couldn't even get 1080p 60 on the games that I played. It had already became obsolete. And I remember Cold Blood Sensei, who probably ain't gonna talk to me for a couple of days because I had to give him this work. Shout out to Cold Blood Sensei. He knows I can get riled up too, just like he can. But Cold Blood Sensei was there listening to me and was like, MF2K, calm down, stop losing your shit, because I couldn't get 1080p 60. I was like, this is ridiculous. I spent all this money on this 2070 card. I bought this computer. Now all of a sudden I can't even get 1080p 60. Consoles weren't doing it at the time. I said, this is ridiculous. Along comes Stadia. And the Stadia came with the proposition, hey, look, we're going to give you games that you want to play. You know what I'm saying? I mean, we may not have all of them at first, but we're going to work towards it. We're going to give you games that you want to play, and we're going to deliver it to you in a system that is going to blow your mind. Why? Because it's going to be more convenient. It's going to lower the cost of you getting involved with games. So instead of you having to worry about hard drives and all that other stuff, now you can spend, instead of spending money on hard drives, it's more money you can spend on games. The convenience is I ain't got to wait for downloads. And the versatility is now you can play your favorite games anywhere. Before, you imagine playing God of War on the phone and experiencing it and enjoying it just as much as you was primarily on your screen. I never thought that could happen. I thought that there might be instances to where I would play Cyberpunk and maybe Division 2 on the go, because my wife, there was a time period before we was buying our house, my wife wanted to go to the mall every weekend and spend up all the money. And I would just be standing outside of Victoria's Secrets for hours upon hours at end, literally just sitting in the mall, walking around the mall. And I said, damn, if I could play my games on the go, this would be great. And then Stadia comes along and I end up playing Madden and Division 2 on the go. And it got to the point to where I stopped driving. My wife just got me to start driving again. I used to drive her to work every day, and then I turned it over to her because I'm sitting there playing Division 2 on my phone. I'm getting more engrossed in gaming. I'm playing games more than ever because it's more convenient and I'm having the most fun that I could ever. And not only was the delivery system great, but then the community was full of smart people that just didn't listen to IGN or some of these other rhetoric-filled places. They knew their shit. So now I was surrounded around smart people that knew what they were talking about. I felt like I was in heaven. And so while I was there in the Stadia community, there were sectors of the Stadia community that we all coalesced around the technology, but we all didn't play the same games. A lot of us were focused on the AAA shit, Stadia improving its technology to get more resolution, to have more games operate at 60 frames per second, all other stuff. And there were those that were just engrossed in the delivery system of something conveniently giving them the ability to play indie games more. But we all coalesced around the delivery system. And because of that, I had a bigger appreciation for things that gamers wanted that may not necessarily have fit my baggage when it came to gaming. So I brought all that up to say this. I can appreciate people liking Game Pass. I can appreciate people liking Microsoft. I can appreciate that. But there are gamers like myself that prefer what we prefer. And like I've said in the podcast not too long ago, I stand for what I stand for. Hardcore quality AAA games. That's why this platform exists. It's NRO Podcast, the new rugged order. Rugged, speaking to the order of which rugged hardcore AAA games are being facilitated, brought to innovation being brought to them and them being produced. That's our cause. Doesn't mean that I don't like your cause until our causes clash. Then when our causes clash, I'm going to stand for my cause. Your cause doesn't have to be mine. Mine doesn't have to be yours. But I'm standing for what I stand for. So even though I can have appreciation for something that isn't fit under my cause, that doesn't mean I'm going to compromise my cause in order for yours. When they collide, when they clash. That's why it's a cause. You know what I'm saying? So, when you have a situation where Sony's business culture is, look, we're going to endure a 70% failure rate in the successfulness of the exclusives that we invest in. If 7 out of every 10 will fail for us financially, but we're still going to try because we got to work. There's a sense of urgency. The other dominoes don't fall if we don't work hard to get as many boxes in as many homes as possible. If we are not working our hardest to do that, then it's a never was. So, and we feel like our best proposition for us to make that hard work come to fruition is to produce the best games exclusively for our ecosystem, which currently speaks to our box right now as things stand in gaming. So if PlayStation's route to that is to put out as many genre-defining, innovative games And they understand that 7 out of 10 of those games may not hit the mark, but they're still going to try. That only benefits me as a gamer because they're going to take risks. They're going to try to innovate. Regardless of what the financial standing is going to be, they got to figure out something that's going to stick. So they're going to keep trying and trying and trying and trying. That only benefits me as a gamer. And they're going to keep trying to produce the best. They're not just trying to have exclusive content. They're trying to produce the best. And they understand in doing that in games, 7 times out of 10, you may fall short. But we're still going to try. To me, that's the best proposal for a AAA hardcore gamer like myself, opposed to, I want to provide you the cheapest way to game. I want to provide you the cheapest way to indulge in the games out there. Let me use another analogy. Hopefully you guys don't go into the weeds on this one. There are 2 places you can eat here, 2 different places that you can eat here in the States. I don't know if any of these places are outside of the States, but let's assume that they're just in the States. One is called Golden Corral. One is called Ruth Chris Steakhouse. You guys may have heard. Ruth Chris Steakhouse might be international. I don't know. But Golden Corral is a buffet place for what was it, $14 dinner time or something like that. You can all you can eat. I know people outside of the States aren't familiar with buffet places, but us fat Americans, we indulge in it often. And you get all this. There's like 40 trays of food, different things from carrots to sesame chicken to pork chops to mashed potatoes, all this stuff. And you could just keep going up as many times as you want until you're done and get whatever you want, to salad, whatever. That's cool if you're just someone who just wants to gorge on gaming. Like you're just looking to fill your stuff with food. But to be honest with you, Golden Corral is not the best cuisine. It's not healthy either. Everything's greasy. To me, everything smells like cauliflower. It's not, you're not getting the healthiest options at Golden Corral. Now, I'm not saying eating steak at a steakhouse is the healthiest option either. But I'm pretty sure the quality of food that you get at Ruth Chris Steakhouse is way better than what you get at Golden Corral. But at Ruth Chris Steakhouse, it's way more expensive. Like you're spending $100 a plate, $100 a person rather, for a full course meal at least. But you're getting quality food. You're getting quality food that you cherish and you're like, wow. Now, if your standards are lower and you can deal with the 40 dishes at Golden Corral that all smell and taste like cauliflower, then go for it. If that's the height of your experience and your pockets is low, all right, go for it. That's why I said I'm not saying Golden Corral should be abolished. But I want the existence of Ruth Chris Steakhouse to exist. And I want them to flourish. Because my standards are higher. Maybe I should use different. I'll be more diplomatic. My standards are different. And I'm willing to pay for the increased quality that my standards provide. And so are many of us gamers. We don't sit there and look at, oh my God, that game is $70. Wait till it comes to Game Pass. We're willing to pay. Because we understand you get what you pay for. And I feel like this deal, if it goes through, it's going to set a precedent to where you are going to see Microsoft and other conglomerates gobble up these third party and then detract from platform makers from being able to say, you know what, we're going to take the risk. We're going to try to create and innovate with our exclusives. And we know 7 out of 10 of them at will may not succeed, but we're still going to keep trying. They only try that because the pot of gold at the end of the rainbow is, okay, because of our exclusives, we got so many boxes in the homes. Now we get to flourish because of the multiplats. If all the multiplats are being bought up by these big conglomerates, then you detract from the reason from them to create these exclusives. Because Yoshida told you himself, the 3 successful ones will lead to the other 7 being covered financially. But that's not what's putting Sony over financially. What's putting them over financially is that because of the box being in so many homes, people are playing the biggest multiplats more on their platforms than the other ones. That's being driven by the exclusives and the pedigree of their exclusives and the name that their exclusives got. So even if you aren't buying the Call of Duty, I mean, even if you're not buying God of War or whatever, or Horizon or whatever, you know of PlayStation's pedigree, and so you're like, well, this is a thing that's known for quality. They're being spoken about and favored by gamers. That's the box I'm getting, and I may indulge in those exclusives, even though I'm mainly getting this for Call of Duty. I prefer the dynamic. I love the delivery systems of increasing screens and stuff like that with cloud gaming. But the dynamic that Sony and arguably Nintendo operate in is the dynamic that creates the best games on the planet. Those are the games that win the awards. Those are the games that get the accolades the most, are those exclusives. So I prefer that business model. Not saying that I want the other business model to die, but I prefer that business model and I want it to flourish. So despite everything that I took 2 hours and 20 minutes to talk to you about, regardless if I agree, regardless of all that stuff and why it's reasonable for the position of both companies to take the positions that they're taking to do what they're doing, I as a gamer want the deal not to go through because it's going to, like the analyst said, they said it's going to, what did they say? Hold on. They said this the day that it was announced. Here, let's put it up there on the screen. This ain't just me talking. And whether you're a PlayStation fan, it's like, no, it's not. Or you're an Xbox fan, it's like, oh, no, it's not going to be that big of a deal. The day that it broke, the analyst said this is the deal that will change the industry forever. And what they had to say was so prominent that it caused Sony to lose $20 billion in market value after it was announced. I'm going to go with them. I'm not listening to you. The person that doesn't have a business acumen, that's just listening to content creator A or content creator B, that's really just feeding you a bunch of horse shit, and that's pilfering you for super chat. And you don't even realize it. You're not even the wiser because you don't have the acumen. I'm not listening. I'm sorry. I'm not listening to you. So with that being said, that's why I don't want the deal to go through. And that's coming holistically from a gamer's perspective. And you guys need to figure that out. I mean, if you're a Country Inn buffet or Golden Corral rather type of gamer, then of course you would prefer what Microsoft is doing. It makes sense that you want the deal to go through. But if you're a quality gamer, and if you're one of these Microsoft gamers that believe that Microsoft is going to bring quality and they're going to once again get back to that pedigree of quality like they were in the OG Xbox in their 360 days, their business model isn't set up for that. Don't hold your breath. In this deal, I don't mind them acquiring companies, even acquiring big companies. Like them acquiring Bethesda made sense. But Activision Blizzard, no. Doesn't make sense to me. And I'm not for it. With that said, that is my case. That is it from your boy. Let's go to the chat. Let's see what people have to say in the chat. And then we're going to conclude. Let's see here. Oh, hold on. Oh, uh-oh. I think we struck a nerve with Cold Blood. I'm sorry, Cold Blood. Again, this is a business lesson. We're providing sight to the blind, and it took me a while to break it down for those that hopefully make sense. I get it. You're a contrarian. You're out to debate and argue. I get it. But hopefully it made sense to those that are less contrarian. Okay. So Cold Blood says, okay, I already read that. He says, let the deal go through, make it exclusive. Again, I explain why for Sony, why that isn't feasible. You know, I'm sick of hearing it too. Oh yeah. And let me conclude with, I'm done talking about this deal until like a major conclusive action happens to where, like, unless any of these regulatory bodies say, you know what, this deal I'm going to approve no matter what, or this deal I'm going to reject no matter what, until one of the regulatory bodies says something like that, I'm not even covering it. Because it's like the smoke and mirrors that we've gotten every year. I'm sorry for Microsoft. Microsoft is the king of smoke and mirrors. This year, this E3 is going to be grand. Oh, wait, I can't wait till I show you next year. This just fits into the whole smoke and mirror narrative. I don't want to participate in it. It's just that it struck a nerve for me. I'm not going to lie. It struck a nerve for me in knowing how ignorant the gaming community is when it relates to business. Like, we should be better at understanding just the basic levels of business than we are. We spend so much time complaining about this action and that action, and we don't even understand why they're happening, or we can't even foresee them. Where we always constantly foresee things happening here, and y'all miss it because y'all don't understand what's going on. And it's not difficult to understand. Trust me, it's not. You ain't got to have degrees in business management and accounting like me. I'm not saying go that far, but understanding what's normal business practice and what motivates these companies to do what they're doing. Like, it's not that hard. Some of you are on Twitter 24/7. Your acumen should be a lot better than this, but you're following the wrong sources. And you got to get better at this. Like I said, I didn't answer this question, even though it's kind of to piggyback off the last one. I don't know this dude's moral compass. That's not my job to interpret. He did a very good job in breaking down in layman's terms something that totally dismisses the overwhelming majority of rhetoric that's out there. He deserves kudos for that. I don't have a tattoo of him on my neck. Like I said, I didn't even buy his coffee or anything. I became a member because I wanted to give him a kudos for doing that. I do appreciate his content and breaking that down. I don't even listen to this guy every day. But he deserves credit where credit is due. And probably the content that I don't listen to, that's probably great too. I don't know. But that has nothing to do with me idolizing anybody. And again, this is for a whole nother podcast. I can agree with you as someone who's a manager, particularly, and I hate throwing this up there and sound like a jackass, but we got to have one of those Coming to Jesus podcasts. This got to be one of those moments. Too many of you look at somebody that you find entertaining or someone that provides something that you can. Too many of you look at people that provide entertainment and coincide them with somebody that has to be a leader. I don't follow Reforce Gaming all like that where I consider him a leader. I give him credit on the content I see. I don't even know this guy. I've never talked to him in my life. I sent a super chat or I sent a comment and a thing, he read it. That's the closest we've gotten to communicating. He's liked tweets of mine. I've liked his tweets. That's it. Everybody that I agree with, I don't correlate to some type of leader. I just agree with their comments. I give them kudos. Maybe that's me as a manager that I can do that and move on. And he ain't got to agree with me politically. We ain't got to vote for the same president. March for the same civil rights. We ain't got to do all that. Hey, that's true what you said, man. I appreciate you for that. And I can move on. And too many people in society they can't agree with somebody unless they're a full embodiment of everything they believe in. That's absurd. That's why our thought processes aren't diverse enough to understand things outside of our prism. Because we're so siloed. I can give you, hey, yo, props up on that and don't agree with you on crap else. And move on. Maybe that's just unique to me because of the role that I've played in life. I make money all the time with people I don't like. That I never invite them to my home. But I know they're great in business and we make money together. And that's it. We go, and then once we're done making money together, we go our own separate ways. I ain't got to love you. I ain't gotta love your family. I ain't gotta like you. You ain't gotta be somebody that if you're dying of thirst, you could be somebody dying of thirst. I wouldn't even spit in your mouth. But we're not gonna like everybody and everybody's not gonna like us. But we still gotta operate in this world together. And you gotta learn how to, and maybe because I was forced into that situation, because being a manager, I don't get to say I don't like you and you don't get a raise. You know what I'm saying? I don't get to say that. I've had plenty of employees that I didn't like, but they gotten the biggest raise from me. There's plenty of employees that I loved, I enjoyed, but I've had to fire. You can't base everything off of what you like and who you don't like. The world isn't designed that everything you need comes from somebody that you like, or everything that you need to avoid is from people that you don't like. That's not how the world works. I don't operate like that. I'm just giving a man a kudos because he was speaking facts and he did it in a very thought-provoking way. He's not my leader because of that. He doesn't become my mentor because of that. I don't know this guy. But I've never looked at it that way. I don't look at people that way. And I don't think anybody should look at people that way. And if people look at other people that way, I can't give you kudos for anything because I don't like your political views, or I don't like that. To me, that's silly and stupid. So, yes, I'm going to give the guy kudos, even though I've never met him in my life. And he deserves them for what he's been saying on this particular subject matter. And I'm going to do it unapologetically. He doesn't replace my mentors, or he doesn't replace my beliefs on everything gaming. I just feel like he's spot on here. And the reason why I'm putting so much emphasis on this is not to rebut Cold Blood so much, but I notice that sentiment so much in gaming. Like, I know people that, like, okay, for instance, some of my best friends in relation to this gaming space are people that I don't agree with. Some of my best friends are people that I don't agree with. I've discovered in content creation that the people that I agree with are more likely the first people to stab you in the back. The aforementioned Cold Blood Sensei, me and him don't agree on anything. He is one of my staunchest supporters. He's of my supporters, he's the most appreciated. Nothing against anybody else, but he's been with me the longest. So I always mention him, and wherever I'm at, he has to be welcomed. So even though he was sitting there talking shit on Stadia, I let the Stadia community know, you got to let him ride. You got to let him ride. That's, you know what I'm saying? That's what I do for admiration and appreciation, because I appreciate him as a person. I appreciate our relationship. I'll put it like that. I appreciate our relationship, not just him as a person, but our relationship. I appreciate him as a person and our relationship. So regardless of what me and him agree on, that's who gets my admiration. That's who gets my respect. That's who gets the more emotional rewards from me. To me, that's more prizeworthy than me just giving you a kudos. But there's too many in this who don't like people as a person just because they don't agree with you. You wouldn't imagine how many friends I've lost simply because I'm not cool with Xbox. Like these people who have, or I'm not cool with a brand that doesn't give a shit about them. You would be surprised at how many friends I've lost because of that. Well, he doesn't like Xbox anymore. He's not my friend. Literally, you would be surprised at how many friends that I lost. Because in the cloud community, because my opinions on cloud no longer were the same as some other people's. They no longer wanted to be cool. You would be surprised. Now, I think I've shown my pedigree. Now, I'm going to say this. Most of these MFers that are out here that say, oh, MM2K, you're trying to make yourself seem like that you have some better moral compass when it comes to this and you're more accepting of people. I've already shown it. People that don't agree with me, they can rock. Now, there's been some people out there that have gone beyond the pale and have done some shady-ish, and that's different. They've done some backstabbing stuff. That's different. But the people that just don't agree with me and don't agree with anything that I say, but are supportive, show up, will retweet what I got to say, whatever, you know what I'm saying? The Cold Blood Senseis, and then Geek to Sneak. But Geek to Sneak loves Xbox. I won't say me and him don't agree on anything, but we definitely are divergent on a lot of things. People like that get more of an emotional reward from me than people that I do agree with, but we don't have a relationship. And I'm not just forging a relationship with you because you agree with me. Like, there's a lot of people that agree with me. You can't just DM me and get an instant response as soon as I see it. But Cold Blood Sensei and Geek to Sneak and other Sean and others, they can, whether we agree or not. Cold Blood Sensei's probably thinking, well, I DM'd you earlier in the day. You ain't respond. And I meant to, but I got sidetracked. I had contractors coming in. But anyway, But cold blood says they can. Everybody can't do that. I get a lot of DMs, and there's a lot of people that, oh, M2K, you're the best. You're this, that, and the other. But those type of off-air things, relationships, I try to be cordial with everybody the best way that I can, as long as you don't, go out of bounds. But the people that get the biggest emotional reward for me are those that I have relationships with. That's beyond whether you agree with me or not. I don't have to have my mane stroked. I ain't got to be the person that everybody agrees with. I'm not one of those creators. I'll argue my points, go about my business. I've always thought outside of the box. I don't follow. So me being able to argue my point, it being in serious contrast with people around me, is nothing new. So I can establish relationships and have very serious relationships with people that don't think like me. And too much in the gaming community, it's built upon, which I get it. The only reason why you may acclimate with some people is because y'all have an agreement on said console. But then that's truly not a friendship. And I've had people, I've given money to people. I've done things for people. I've had people come to me and say, can you help me with this? Things that you would only do for people on a personal level, personal friendship level. I've done things for people after they request. It's different if I just did it for them and they didn't even ask for it. But I've had people come to me and ask for stuff, and I've done it for them on a personal friendship level, who threw the friendship away simply because we no longer like the same box. The community, not all of them, not our supporters here, and not all of you guys out there and gals out there, but a large portion of the community is fake. It's fake and phony, and it's all about belonging. And it's all about riding a wave of what notion is popular at the moment. And I refuse to play that game. So understand, when you come here for content, you're getting my full-throated opinions and analysis that I try to research the best way I can about stuff. You're not getting something from me that I think is just going to get traction. If it was about me simply getting traction, I would play the game like everybody else. So, my thoughts. Let's see here. Let me read these last two comments from Cold Blood, and then we're going to call it a night. Cold Blood says, I could never do this ish for super chat money. This deal should not be why I get paid by people rather than... Yeah, Cold Blood, you would be surprised at... I'm not going to name it. I know people that do not like Xbox, but are jumping out of shoes and socks for this deal. And I've had conversations with people over that. And it's business. Is it dishonest? Yeah. But you got to understand, you can't come for the internet. You can't come to the internet for integrity. And that's why Cold Blood, in relation to the emphasis on someone having integrity, I don't come to the internet for integrity. To me, that's a fool's errand. I'm looking to discover facts. I'm looking to find the cascading of facts. I'm looking to grow my knowledge base. I'm looking to help others increase theirs. And wherever I see that happening, you're going to get my kudos. There is no tie emotionally in regards to integrity. For most of these people out here, it's all about facades. It's solely about facades. Now, I may scream at times and do all that for entertainment and shock value, but behind all that screaming and yelling, you're getting the authentic take from me and my core belief system. And for a lot of these content creators, you're not getting it. They'll be first to admit to you Sony is better in their eyes. They play PlayStation more, or they play something else more. But Xbox is where it's at right now as far as social media is concerned. Man. And that's why they do and say what they say and do. And lastly, Cold Blood says, Stadia showed us who the real was. And it was a temporary gamer. Now, I will say this. Stadia it brought back a lot of people to gaming, and a lot of people who wasn't gaming before Stadia felt like they still needed to get their fix. And they've just completely dissolved to Xbox or PlayStation. I'm going to tell you why, Cold Blood, even though you don't believe it, but you wouldn't know this because, again, you were just there to troll the Stadia gamers and really didn't give two flying dudes about them. There's this thing called exophase. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Cold Blood, but it's kind of like, it's like a tracker of video game activity. And there's other programs like that out there, but exophase was the one that was big for Stadia because I think exophase was like the only one that cared to track Stadia activity and stuff like that when you were playing a Stadia game. Exophase was the only one. So you would always see exophase activity out there from gamers. Most of those people that I would see that exophase activity from, I still see it. It just isn't for Stadia anymore. It's for a lot of it's for Xbox. A lot of people that left Stadia went to Xbox. And like I said, that's that whole dynamic of having friends. Because y'all all was supporting Stadia. Okay, now I'm not real big on Xbox. These are just my beliefs. I'm not mad at you for going to Xbox. I ain't buying it. And then you lose friends. You know what I'm saying? But a lot of people, that's where you get the whole MM2K. We appreciate your provocative takes, whether I agree with them or not. They say that when we're both supporting Stadia, but when I don't support Xbox and you do, then all of a sudden, then that goes all out the window. But anyway, a lot of them are still playing, and those are people that I know firsthand. In hearing them, they weren't playing games before Stadia, so Stadia was kind of like a gateway drug of getting them back into gaming. So, but when you say real gamers, I get what you're saying, but I will say that Stadia did. I know Xbox people were trained to hate Stadia, but I think if there's any group out there that needs to be thankful that Stadia existed, it's Xbox gamers for two reasons. Reason number one, really three reasons. I'll say reason number one is, and I'll go from the least significant to the most significant. Reason number one is Xbox, again, the end result of Stadia closing down largely converted a lot of those Stadia gamers to Xbox. They appreciate Xbox. They love Xbox. And so they've gone there. The number two reason is that Xbox could use that cloud support, and they're getting a lot of support from cloud gamers that still like to game in the cloud because of their branching of their games across some different cloud platforms. So, and they're growing in popularity with the cloud community, even though it's not that big. But like in this whole CMA, in this ABK case, it may be prevalent if CMA or these regulatory bodies go to question these cloud gamers that spend a significant amount of their gaming time on the cloud. If they go and interview them and take into consideration some of the things that they're saying as far as market equality or whatever, if that becomes a factor, Microsoft has won them over. And lastly, this has nothing, well, it does have to do with the cloud. Lastly, why, if you're an Xbox gamer, you need to be thanking your lucky stars for Stadia. As told by Brad Sams, Xbox was going to, instead of releasing the Xbox Series S because developers didn't want to develop for that console, they were going to have the Series X, and then they were going to have xCloud as your least expensive offering, and they were going to release their dongle for xCloud or whatever. And when the poor performance of xCloud versus what they saw Stadia could do is what made them change their mind. And we as PlayStation gamers or AAA, we can laugh at the Series S, but the only reason why Xbox is, even though the gap is widening, even though the only reason why Xbox is even still in it at this point versus Sony is because of the Series S. If they would have moved forward with that plan to have xCloud be the cheaper option versus the Series X being their main platform, it would be over. The generation would be over already. So because of that, even though Stadia flopped out and didn't come to fruition the way it should have been, and it was mishandled by the upper brass, not by the Stadia team, by the upper brass, Xbox gamers owe so much to Stadia's existence. So he said that's sad from one falling platform to another. Oh God. All right, with that said, I'm closing out. I appreciate all of y'all. Thank y'all for coming through and listening to this. 3 hours and 24 minutes. Holy cow. But we had to break this down. Hopefully you guys appreciate this. With that said, thank you. We'll be back. There's not going to be a game stream today, I'm sorry, but we'll be back tomorrow with tomorrow's Wednesday. I got some stuff to do Wednesday, so it's up in the air what we're going to do tomorrow. Just stay tuned. Just follow me on Twitter at MM2K, at MM2K Gaming to see what we're going to do tomorrow. It's been a crazy few weeks. And there's some important things I got to do tomorrow. So with that said, I appreciate everybody. Thank you so much. And until next time, have a wonderful gaming day. Peace.